Hello there. Hello everyone, I'm Airier, and today I'm definitely not late because a kitten dropped at my feet and it went, "You must pet me, father." And I definitely didn't spend way too much time petting their little cute little cheeks and their fluffy little tail. And I didn't completely geek out over a cute fluffy kitten who doesn't usually want affection, but suddenly wanted that. That definitely didn't happen. Also, I was getting coffee. More importantly, in the chat while I wasn't here, a fan with too much time, who is the person responsible for the video we're reacting to today, the Star Wars Warhammer 40K episode 28, Warriors, War Machines, War, all capitalized, very important, that last part. He's threatening people in the chat by writing in, or saying he will write in, Ewoks riding potato bears. Do I want to know? I'm not sure I do. I'm also not sure I'm muted or not right now because that has never happened before, and I definitely didn't start late because I forgot to hit go live, and that definitely didn't happen. There is no evidence otherwise. Yeah. More importantly, we're going to jump right in because I'm really curious to see what's going to happen. So let's do that. Also, I can do this now. Yeah. Some of you might have noticed this is a new camera. Hopefully this time it'll actually focus on me rather than the carpet. I give it 5 minutes. There we go. And Fan is in the chat saying he's not threatening people in the chat. Oh, he's threatening everyone, not just in the chat. Got it. Analogies. It's a good thing I didn't just shake my face right into a little kitten's fluff ball because their tummies are cute and soft because I'm allergic to cats, and that would be bad. I know better than that. We're just going to pretend that's the case, and let me have my dignity. What little of it I pretend to have. All right, starting up now. Also, I usually cut it up. I say that every video, except for the ones where I forget. Collaboration with... who are we collaborating with? Nora of the excellent Horrible Gaming YouTube channel. Oh yeah, they've commented a few times. And frankly, their audio so far is amazing. Creaking? No, that's drums. A march? Ooh, that's an interesting choice. Episode 28. Hey, I got the episode right. And I also sneezed right on my screen. Lovely. Warriors is written weird. I wonder why he chose it that way. He might be answering my question in the chat, but if I look over, I will distract myself. War machines. Okay, so something digital there. Oh, it's probably the difference between... Whoa. That's very Star Wars font. So we have something primal, something metallic, and something that's just Star Wars. That's my assumption.
Nothing left. And from where his strength now came, he could only barely begin to guess, and had no interest in doing so. All that mattered was that Sando still had more to give. Always
Surprised we saw him so frequently.
The clone was limping, feet shuffling as he descended as quickly as he could down the rubble slope, whilst also ensuring his feet remained safely beneath him. Drool dripped past his gritting teeth as he struggled to force himself through the strobing pain he felt past his gritting teeth. Struggled to force himself through the strobing pain he felt coming from a spot on his leg.
Ooh.
About a hand span from his left knee where he had taken a bad hit. How bad? He did not know yet, but it wasn't bad enough to prevent his incremental retreat. So he questioned nothing else about it.
So he's still moving. It's not that bad
yet.
He
knew he'd be able to move faster were it not for the commando he was pulling along beside him.
Oh, he's saving someone.
But each time he considered dropping the man, he found the thought paired with the idea of laying down and dying himself.
Nice.
For good or for ill, his brother at his side was perhaps the hidden strength he found to carry on. And even if he was not, good soldiers did not abandon their own.
I love this for reasons that are actually completely unrelated to the episode. Because right now he's talking about good soldiers not abandoning their own. But in the previous episode with the, I'm guessing, corn clones, you know what I mean. If you know anything 40K, you know what I mean when I say corn clones. But I realize that saying it that way sounds corny. Every time it hits me. they are very much already abandoning, they're post-abandoning everything, just charging in, mayhem, blood, completely got rid of all of the entire, well, good aspects that Sando's talking about right now. So it's a huge dissonance between what we saw the crazed ones do and then him, who is basically clone Rambo, it seems like, and surviving things that really shouldn't be survived. I like seeing that little differentiation right now.
He clutched the armored forebrace of the commando sniper, which kept the man secure and hefted over Sando's shoulder. While the clone used his other hand to balance as he hit the base of the broken earth and traversed the shattered and cratered street that had become the main body of the developing battle. His mind was still reeling. Everything had gone to hell so fracking fast.
Yes. Honestly, the fact that his mind is only reeling, considering he, previous episode, walked into an explosion that he detonated, having a mind is more than he probably should at this point. Also, hey, Hobbit, thanks for... Ooh, Cornflake Clones, $2 donation. Oh my god. Yeah, the super chat for Cornflakes. Why isn't Games Workshop doing that? It's like one of their branding. It's stupid. It's over the top stupid. And have I mentioned it's stupid? So, in other words, it's still better than the Inquisitor novel. I know what I said. I'm sticking to it.
The bunker had been blown up, so their mission had been a technical success. Yet, more and more, it was becoming obvious that the hard point they had hit had always been nothing more than a stalling tactic. A road bump to force the slow of their advance long enough for these new destroyers to arrive and do the actual work.
Is he talking about the sisters? Or did one of their tactical walkers appear? No, the walkers were in the different area on the bridges instead, so they're not here. Did something happen in the meantime, or are we just talking about the sisters? They just blew up.
Sando and the other clones had been blasted and smoked out of their cover by a flanking force of what he could only assume to be female space marines. But they were different.
Oh man, sorry, just that right there. The initial assumption, oh, they have female space marines, is admittedly something that is very contentious in 40K, and I absolutely am very annoyed by everyone who argues about it because I really do not care. For example, model. Here, I'll put it up there. I'm not sure if this will actually be zoomed in on, so yada. Yes, see the model that is definitely being zoomed in on. I have no idea if this is actually visible or not. Yeah. Female Space Marine. Granted, it's also from a completely different game, Ravage Star, but it's a thing. Putting that back on before I forget. I do not care personally, but I know some people are very dedicated to the idea that there's no female Space Marines. So even the assumption that, oh my god, there might be ones, is just probably going to set someone off who read this and like, oh my god, why are they doing that? So I just like that it's controversy baiting without actually controversy baiting. Also, if anyone makes it to this point and this is the part that threw them off, really? I mean, there's heads they sell for Space Marine bodies. They just say, hey, they're bulky enough. Say it's female. Here's a female head. They're shaved. I know Eons of Battle bought a bunch of them, so it's a perfectly legit thing. And honestly, the sculpt is better than a lot of the normal human face sculpts in 40K, so it's actually preferable in general for anything, because I really hate the face sculpts. Oh, dear God, they are horrible. Armor, great. Faces, most of the time, with very few exceptions, they're not 40K strong suit.
Different from what had been described to Sando and the others in the debrief. More vicious, more reckless, more willing to stare down death and worse for the mere privilege to strike a killing blow against their foe.
That's the sisters, all right.
Sando had seen their faces, witnessed their eyes through crack.
Wait, shit, fan, what did you say? The sisters of battle? And he's just going La Mafao. Blur Marines! That's why we never see them. Genius. Oh, yeah, I know it didn't zoom in. I'm not really sure how to get my camera to do that automatically yet.
Lenses and shattered helmets. He had expected to see monsters or humans. What he saw instead was the world-eating madness of the alien Imperial faith.
Yeah, no, that's pretty accurate.
They do eat up worlds. Had been annihilated in seconds, and what managed by haste or cunning to survive had been sent running
Thought I
down
broke
the
the screen for a
rubble-strewn
second.
slope of the tiered sidewalks and towards the main avenue. However, this was little better than what had assailed them from above, as many clones had discovered. Running straight into
was
the
above?
crossfire being exchanged by the initial Imperial defense and the Republic's own advancing vanguard forces.
Oh,
Those
no man's
with
land.
some modicum of ARC trooper or commando training, like Sando and the Deltas, had managed to escape the slaughter by the barest of margins, and mostly by keeping to the sides, remaining low and staying swift, only forced into the street by the intercession of collapsed buildings.
Oh.
Brought down by a combination of Republic collateral and the wanton destruction of the Imperials.
Yeah, they do that.
Even now, Sando was unsure if he was suffering from a blaster wound or some perverse emperor-worshipping death weapon.
Seriously? Those are the only things he can think of that might be fucking him up? The guy literally exploded himself, probably within the hour. Again, Rambo. This guy is Rambo. Also, Arx, he said, if you see this, how much chaos and heresy do those models have? I might like to get some of my Draconic Marines if they aren't too heretical. They are very chaosy. They were heavily designed by Wargamer Dave and MIDI Wargaming. So the human models are incredibly chaos flavored. They're also only available on a Kickstarter, and I think there is a limited time buy option right now, so you can get them if you want. I like them. I went on the backing for it, so I also entered the painting competition, so they have the free SCLs if you have a printer. Also, I think the painting competition ends today if you want to do that, so go fast.
Less fortunate than him had been the commando known as Sev, who had been running ahead of Sando on the slope towards the street. The insane clone had been hefting a sniper rifle, or at least the sniper rifle configuration of his powerful
That's the one he's carrying, isn't he?
DC-17M. How on earth the man could run over ground like this and shoot accurately as he did was something even Sando struggled to understand. But the impressive display had been cut dramatically short only moments later.
Oh?
A missile. Someone had perhaps noticed the clone's running maneuver and had been impressed enough by it to lob some kind of rocket or missile in the Delta's direction. It came in on a blazing tail of black smoke, and it would have killed them both had the commando not shot it mid-flight, nailing the explosive head of the projectile dead center with his sniper configuration. Sando would have doubted that the deed was even remotely possible had it not occurred right before his eyes.
Okay, no. Sando has no right to say, I don't believe this is possible. The guy literally, and I keep coming back to this, walked into a room, blew it up with him at the door, and lived. And his only complaint now is, I might have been shot. Not I walked into an explosion that took out multiple people in power armor. You have no right, sir, to say anything seems impossible. Oh my god. I kind of love this guy because he's the only man who doesn't realize he's not the everyman.
And saved his life to boot. But, unfortunately, the missile had gotten close enough to Sev to throw him clear from his feet, hurling the clone against the slope's uneven surface.
That's why he's carrying him now, huh?
The commando hit the rough floor with an impact that rattled Sando's bones, tumbling him about before ultimately leaving the specialist dazed on the ground, laying flat save for a leg which was obviously twisted and broken.
Yeah.
Sando had almost found the weakness to simply limp past his brother in arms, but he could clearly see that Sev was still alive, and they were so close, both so close. So he had paused for a fraction of a moment and chose to painfully haul the trooper up onto his shoulder, cursing himself all the while, and together they limped down the rubble and through the fields of fire.
Dude. Also, Kubik, if you ever see this, your art style just between now and when I first saw Fan put them in, holy shit, man. This is just so freaking cool looking. And you get the exact moment you see the blast wave coming off it. Yeah, no, the framing looks great. And I'm being told in the chat, Sev is actually a character from Republic Commando, so he's one of the NPCs you're allied with. Wait, Oh, he's an aim bot. That's why his aim is so good. That's the joke. I'm not used to allied NPCs being good, so apparently this one really was.
Praying to the gods they did not have for survival. Admittedly, Sev did more than pray, gathering strength enough to heft his blaster up with one hand as they both crossed into the stained chrome of the street.
Considering previously mentioned chaos clones, saying he did more than pray is implying he also prayed. Considering something out there is listening right now. That is, you know, I was going to say it's a distinctly bad option, but this is still the Star Wars side, which is not inherently as corrupted on the warp side, even if the Materium side is very corrupted. So maybe it won't be nearly as bad. Maybe. It's entirely possible maybe good warp entities exist in the Star Wars side. And I'm going to try to convince myself of that.
Street. The clone growled as he began to blind fire his rifle over his shoulder, sending shots into the rubble and up towards the tide of gathering death, which was now starting to pour over the lip of the ruins and building they had been contesting. Sando could hear and feel the vibrations, the heralding of Doom's latest attempt to reach out and swallow the clone whole. And it was coming. The apparent female Space Marines had stopped only long enough to rally and organize in the cover that the clones had fled from.
Surprised they needed a rally.
Any of their surviving brothers that had been trapped there before forming assault ranks. Then, raising punitive weapons into the air, they screamed blatant rage-riddled war cries into the rain-stifled sky. And the fighting from both sides seemed to stutter and almost cease in sudden appreciation of their hate.
This is going to be a little silly right now, but I like the idea that they formed up ranks to charge in and shout the battle cry, mostly because I am a Sisters player, not a very good one, so I did actually paint up this model today. You know what? Why not? Because I can. I actually play like this, where I form ranks with the Sisters and just drop them in. Here, let's see if we can get this one to actually zoom in this time. I have no idea if this is going to zoom in or not, so if it doesn't, I have blurry images. They have been painted in such a weird way that they cannot be observed by anything mechanical. Shit, it's not supposed to fall. I have lost multiple fiddly bits that way, so that is very embarrassing. Let's pretend that didn't happen. Also, Josh Tompkins, what's up, man? Ooh, and here we find a wild Airier in his natural habit. Overthinking a random word. Me overthinking? That makes perfect sense. I do that frequently. But I enjoy it. I do hope the prey aspect does come in, just because things are listening now.
It was clear to all present that something horrifying or wonderful was about to happen. Well, it depends whose side you're on. Standing on a factional crux. The moment came, and then the moment passed. Though the hellish saints of the Imperial forces did not cease their cries as they began. Charging, shooting, and flying into the air on wings of resplendent flame. Like an avalanche composed of gorgeous, sanctified ruination and animus towards all life, they fell upon the rear of the survivors, butchering the men who remained on the slope before wading into the street, utterly heedless of return fire and friendly fire. Their scythe.
I know it's a small thing, but I love the shoulder pads. It's ribbed for their protection. And I kind of wish that was actual choice along with the cloaked head. I like cloaks in general. I'm very tempted by the Dark Angels because they have robes everywhere. It's not what I want to play. It's not what I want to buy, but it looks so cool. Same with the Dark Angels, not just the Dark Angels, but also the Black Templars, because robes, they look good, all right? Sand-colored robes are just really freaking neat in war models.
Everything was absolute, and had Sando and Sev not been nearer to the front of the retreating men, they would never have made it for as long as they did. Coughing fumes and propelling themselves against the promise of death, the two clones managed to cross the ragged front line, limping as best they could, almost collapsing once they scrambled over and past the trench that had been beaten into the street. Yet something in Sando warned him, made him feel no safer falling here than falling in the middle of that street. He pulled the two of them even further, and Sev cursed, but voiced no more complaints than that as he looked over his shoulder. Sando did not even try, focusing on their retreat and failing to see what Sev had glimpsed.
Oh, what did he see?
The sisters came on and did not even pause as they crested the front line. They trampled over most of the troopers, fanatical voices raised in haunting, world-ending cries of war, as toothed blades and glowing swords hacked down again and again.
Okay, I thought that was a flamer earlier. No, that is a multi-melta at short range. Oh, so Kubik put a lot of blood effects in here. And considering the bolter shells and how big these are visibly, this is probably more blood than someone actually has, but it looks cool. Dude, I'm kind of curious about why the backpack is glowing. Is that just a natural detail and I never realized it? I mean, it could easily be that way, and I might actually want to do it if I can ever figure out how to do a glow effect without it coming off as dull. And fans asking why I want sand-colored robes and power armor. Anakin didn't like that as his apparent response. Oh my god.
Cutting men and machines to inert pieces. Each voiced him becoming a screamed triumph. Some weapons managed to catch and wound the armored warriors, throwing them off their feet and cracking their shells open, revealing the maddened humans within. But the Republic clones simply were not armed with enough of these, with only specialized troopers carrying.
Yeah, and they're not there for anything multi-melta. They're not there for the flamers.
Blaster fire hissed and sizzled against the armored Imperials, but without an excess of men assembled and ready to focus fire.
Yeah, they don't have armor
boiling
penetration.
The women alive in their battle suits became non-viable as a strategy. The result was predictable. Sando and Sev ran on, frantic, panting, and losing speed. He knew they were finished, that they would be sighted down and destroyed at any moment, and soon.
But with Sando's luck...
And what he did not know was where in the hell he was going. The answer
is he going to accidentally flank
them? The two beleaguered clones as they crested the top of a half-buried ATTE that lay in their path.
Oh.
Sore eyes
Does the
softening on the sight of the rear advancing line of the vanguard. And to the tremendous relief of all involved, they had evidently prepared heavier weapons, just in case of a space marine threat. Sando
How heavy are we talking about?
Scrambled and fell down the side of the ruined walker, narrowly avoiding the first of the pursuing sisters, who came over the top of the leg tank in several places, as well as around the sides.
Oh?
Appearing in a near unbroken line as they sought to continue their charge. Sando made to get up and run, but Sev used his weight and leverage to haul the clone down and cover him with his body, an act that saved them both.
Oh?
PLX
Covering
missile
them, or?
launchers fired from the advancing vanguard
that's
ranks. Their guided heads soaring around the two clones, aimed over them or to the sides and
okay, I know this is kind of silly to pause on, but the idea of the clones using guided missiles is actually incredibly funny to me because years ago I played a lot of Star Wars Battlefront on the PSP, and I was the guy who would sit in the back by the ammo respawn and then guide a missile out that continuously respawns. You had infinite fires as long as you could thread the needle through the entire map with a guided missile. It was fun because you could spawn kill people from your own spawn. I was toxic as fuck. But hearing about this now is like, yes. Truly, this is the most powerful weapon in the entire Republic arsenal, and anything less than that is just that. Less than that.
Colliding explosively with the pursuing sisters. Warheads powerful enough to stall and stop starships pelted with ruthless precision into the raging front ranks of the Imperial forces. Blast waves rolled out, flamethrowers and Imperial munitions detonating as the Republic projectiles performed their lethal functions. The sisters rose from that ruin, however, some shining, most standing, gritting frenzied teeth in a promise of vengeance.
Also, Kubik, you're in the chat. 1, hi. 2, and you gotta head out. Oh, Happy New Year, man. Thanks for dropping in. Oh, dude.
Then came the second salvo, and then the third. In the face of the enfilade and the savage losses they were sustaining, the female Space Marines, or at least what Sando had taken
keep calling
to be
them
female
that.
Space Marines, fell back to the trench line they had taken and began
they
to
actually didn't charge
rally
in.
once more.
I guess they're not that berserk yet.
Other
If it
clones
was
found the
Repentia.
two, covered in scrap and ash, pulling them back behind the fighting to treat them and apply Bacta. Scant minutes later,
Bacta is
Sando
impressive.
found himself sitting on a munitions crate. A set of warmed hay.
This is a little off topic, but actually somewhat tangentially related, which is better than my usual tangents. He mentioned the Bacta, and they claimed the entire world, or specifically, the Imperium claimed the entire world, and whatever Tatooine counts as. No Man's Land? I'm wondering if the Republic had stores of Bacta there. I would assume so, but also it was a planet that was being contested, so they might have been exposed and destroyed because, I mean, the CIS had mostly mechanical troops, so Bacta would not really help them. If they had stockpiles of that, though, for any reason left behind, I'm wondering what the Empire would, or not the Empire, well, the Imperium would think of that, because that is basically space healing mucus godsend of whatever the hell that stuff is. And I'm pretty sure if there's an explanation of what it is in Star Wars, it's going to be disgusting. But that could be incredibly powerful. Like, talking about game changers, safe travel through the warp is still a bigger one. But hey, by the way, walk it off is an actual thing right now, rather than drug it up and try to ignore it, which is most of the Empire, no, well, the Imperium style. Granted, I mean, Space Marines can walk it off and ignore it, but healing it up immediately would probably be crazy.
Hastily offered rations sitting in his lap as he watched the ordered lines of his brothers starting to push further and further forward. As the stiff legs of the ATTEs began to pass his position, firing even then as they entered the battle, he even dared to hope the pendulum of the battle had begun to swing in the
Oh, he's doing the thing. He's doing the, well, I guess it's as bad as it's going to get, or it can't get any worse, because now he said we might have a chance. That is horrible. And considering how force sensitive this guy is, I want to just personally believe he caused it because of his connection to the force. I mean, I don't actually believe that, but I want to because it amuses me. Whatever's about to happen, I'm blaming Sando.
Republic's direction. But the Republic was not the only force that had begun to deploy heavy armored vehicles to their front line.
Oh,
and
knights
Sando
or walkers?
felt his stomach tighten too
tanks?
much to eat anything as he saw three forms rising into view from behind the various
Are we going
obstructions
knights?
of the battlefield. He heard them first, had been hearing them in fact, but only
Tanks?
now did he realize what it was he was hearing behind all the noises
won't be a Titan yet. That would be a
filled
huge
the
reveal still.
battlesphere. It was music. Not unlike
Oh,
the
it's one
hymns
of those-
shouted from the
I have
armored
the model.
Imperials,
It's the
but
organ
louder
tank.
and instrumental. It had begun as a distant swell that now grew staggeringly loud, and the clone could see why. Massive golden speakers, encrusted heavily with artistic depictions of angels and death, blasted the noise from the sides of the large, box-shaped tanks. Each of the three which approached was a custom.
And in the background, Fan changed up the audio so that the soundtrack is a hymn because the cathedral tanks have arrived. I mean, literally, it's slap an an organ on a rhino. It is now a rocket launcher, a giant rocket launcher platform. It's ridiculous, and I kind of love and hate them. Love them because they look cool. Hate them because transporting them is a bitch.
Customized, shining work of art.
Yep.
And each bore a pew at its head.
Exorcist, that's what
each
they're
pew
called.
occupied by one of the armored warrior sisters they now contended with. But most notable were the golden pipes and spines that rose up from behind the presumed preacher of destruction. Like the
Preacher of
massive,
destruction.
fluted implements of an enormous organ, they towered
No,
and
it is
shimmered
an
the centerpiece
enormous
of
organ.
each of the tanks.
That's what they're hearing.
From the front of each vehicle protruded a fat, heavy weapon, spitting explosive projectiles towards the clones as they advanced.
I guess I do have some guns.
Sando could see the Vanguard forces aligning to destroy the tanks with another salvo of their PLXs.
Ooh.
But before the first missile could
They're already
find
prepared
its
to fire.
lock, the organs atop the enemy vehicles began to play. Missiles fired from each of the pipes.
Play the
Smoke and
missiles!
flame issuing as the music blared from the tanks and rose in a deafening, glorious crescendo. The missiles
They literally
that flew
ride to
free
battle
of the
with their
gilded
own
tubes
theme
arched
song.
high into the air and began to rain down. The Republic returned fire, missiles and ATTE-mounted railguns scrambling to destroy the blocky vehicles before they could fire off another rain. But already the first was on its way. All forces were struck at nearly the same time, and all suffered greatly, but the Republic suffered more.
Oh?
The missiles came straight down, evading most cover and striking the ATTEs on the top of their chassis, where their main guns were mounted. Whole
they're less
squads
armored?
of clones in secure positions were blasted into gory fountains.
Because they went down.
And most of the arriving ATTEs found themselves either crippled or entirely disabled.
Yep.
For the
Because they weren't built
Republic's
from
part,
top down,
only
apparently.
one of the 3 tanks managed to survive the
Damn!
fire, the smoking ruin.
2/3 destruction. That's pretty good on the Imperial side.
Away from the front, unable to fire again. But the damage had been done, and the sisters had capitalized on it,
And that
charging
turns it
once
around.
more and meeting not with another killing field, but with contested and pitched resistance. The battle was not decided, but it was going sour fast.
Yeah.
Sando hesitated and began to stand. Where are you going? Asked Sev from nearby, his broken leg now locked in a fast cast.
Oh, you got a cast.
I'm retreating, Sando said. There's no point. Sev snapped
Why
back.
not?
Nothing behind us but the main column. You can fight then, or you can fight here.
I'm assuming he means the main column of the enemy, unless he wanted to say fight here or fight with more allies. It wouldn't make sense otherwise.
He said, rigging his DC-17 into an anti-armor grenade launcher configuration.
They have how many
Then why
configs?
fight here? Sando demanded angrily.
Fewer enemies?
Because we're needed here. The commando growled.
Is Sev just going to snipe all of the preachers, or I guess the organ players? They're all visible, which admittedly is part of the stupidity design, but also part of the epic, incredibly stupid, intentionally stupid design of 40K. You know what? I'm going to laugh my ass off if he actually does snipe all 3 of the people playing the organ, because that would just be funny to me.
As if the answer was the most basic of all common sense answers. And it was. Sando felt suddenly ashamed of himself. He had poured out so much of himself that he had fooled his own mind into believing that he was not being a coward. That he had done enough. But enough was not done until the Republic won, and that responsibility was Sando's as much as it was Sev's. You're right.
Oh, the music changed.
Of course I am, said Sev.
Oh my god,
Now
Sev
come
is a
take
legend.
this pistol from my hip.
I wish he was
Grab
probably
that
gonna die.
DC-15 lying over there. Jack it up to maximum power and help me get up.
They could be powered up. And he goes, the chosen one? I mean, I'm pretty sure that's Anakin, but weird not to call him just Anakin, though.
Anakin fell to his knees almost at once. He pushed his senses and abilities
Because
within
he
the
was being
Force
taken over
towards
right
the
here.
Blackstone rod, clutched in his hand, and felt it swell with unnatural power. But no sooner had this strength come upon him than it was suddenly and mercilessly assailed. He felt as though he had suddenly been thrust under a freezing waterfall of liquid lead.
Oh?
And it was trying with each surging concussion to force his hand away from the rod. He clenched his metal fist as tightly as he could, not allowing himself to be repulsed as he struggled under the weight of the suppression. All
Fan, I get it. The image you chose, it's a classic Darth Vader scene, choking someone, grabbing someone, but you had to have known. How did you know? I don't even need to say anything. And oh, god damn it. The previous episode where they were talking about the rod he had to pull out was demonetized for that scene. And honestly, I understand why. Even YouTube thought it was a bit much. Oh, wow. Also, I just spit on my screen. Oops. Gonna just wipe that down. That's embarrassing. Oh my god, this is gonna get me. It's not even funny. It's a very intense scene. I love the music in the background, but oh wow. I hope my wife doesn't hear this.
All the while, Kaon waited and watched. He
Very voyeuristic.
observed as the Jedi faltered, and even began to wonder if his strength was already expended enough for an attempt to occur. But bent as he was, Anakin remained unbowed, and slowly, gradually, his power seemed to build. His face was reddening, his false hand creaking, and the Chaos Sorcerer of the Thousand Suns found himself being impressed as the Jedi General managed to gradually push the null presences around them back and away.
Damn. He's actually powering through null fields.
Is this enough? Anakin asked.
Almost.
Said Kaon.
Give it everything.
He added.
Okay, come on. You had him purr the words, give it everything. You had to have known. Oh my, I don't. If this is someone's first experience of the story, they are going to get the very wrong impression. Or the very right impression. It changes in ways I was not expecting.
And Anakin seemed to comply. The veil was now lifted, parting under the surge of Anakin's remaining strength, and Kaon got to work. It was a simple matter, infiltrating the lame shadow thoughts of the servitors.
He just needs a hand.
Inducing a large, catastrophic aneurysm between the 9 suspended weapons.
Ooh.
Thanks to their integrated systems, the very thing meant to keep them safe from each other. The results spread from the initial victim out and through to
Infection.
all of them, and soon
Because he can
they were
hack
quivering
electronics.
and losing targeting cohesion as blood pooled
something like that.
in their brains and dripped from their eyes and noses.
Because they're servitors, they still
The
have
two
those,
masked women noticed the disturbance right away, but Kaon was also attacking them as well,
Is he gonna
appearing
bite their
beside
heels?
them as an illusion of his former intact self.
Oh!
The two
That would do it.
trained women, already on the edge from the failure of the gun servitors, reacted instantly, without fear or even the semblance of hesitation, raising shotguns and discharging into the illusion. One died instantly, her face blown away by the blast of her companion.
Yep, because they shot through
The
each other.
other died more slowly, her stomach and chest having taken the brunt of the point-blank discharge.
He actually got them
In
to shoot each other.
seconds, the wall of guns and
God.
vigilance that guarded their
Still
destination
probably safer than letting him
had
do anything.
fallen, and now all that remained was for the Jedi to fall as well. Are you done?
Not yet.
Anakin grunted through grit teeth.
Almost.
Just gotta take out the
Said
last
Kaon,
body.
watching without eyes as Anakin began to shake, his body beginning to convulse. The sorcerer had no intention of allowing Anakin to destroy himself, patiently waiting for the exact moment. prepared to take the burden on his own body when the instant of transference was upon them. He waited, but while Anakin seemed to falter, to waver, to come within inches of his defeat, he did not fall.
Oh?
He was a truly impressive psyker, and the display of his raw will and talent only made Kaon crave escaping his own ruined body all the more.
Oh, God, this is so... It doesn't sound nearly as PG-13 as some of the previous sections, but it is actually way creepier about how he's craving the flesh of a younger man. I'm not even making that shit up. That is exactly what is happening here. And I see everyone in the chat is just going, Slaanesh much. Slaanesh is here. Slaanesh. Yeah, yeah. Hey, I'm not the one who wrote it. And it very much comes off that way. I'm just wondering, is he going to do it at the worst possible time, or is he going to do it now? Now is probably a good time, but if he waits because he's impressed and wants to see what Anakin can still do, I fully expect Anakin could probably do a lot with the Space Marine body. And he already has one missing hand. Why not go for a second? But he wouldn't know there's a hand missing. He would just think it's a whole body. And while it is, he could just get prosthetics, but he doesn't realize that yet. And also, the entire tongue missing thing would be a little annoying. But that's really not the worst thing that happens in 40K.
But with every
the eyes might be.
moment, the man known as Kingbreaker became more and more anxious as well. They were already connected via the rod, and Kaon could feel the odd way in which the warp seemed to move within the man.
Oh?
Then it happened. The first part of him to give way, to Kaon's surprise, was his mechanical arm, which shattered like frozen glass. For a moment there was despair, for the Chaos Space Marine had not anticipated that the machine would fail before the flesh did. And with his connection to the rod broken, the transference would be hampered.
You know, Fan and a lot of other people have mentioned that luck is very much a 40K thing, but also specifically it does have an aspect. Actually, never mind. Fan hasn't mentioned that. A lot of people talking about Fan have mentioned luck in 40K and luck in at least Fan's interpretation of Star Wars seem to be Force related. I'm wondering if this was the Force acting to destroy the hand as a way to give Anakin a hand. I realized what I was about to say, and I hate myself for the pun. It wasn't even intentional. It just came out. Oh. Can we pretend I didn't say that? Thanks.
Or so he had thought. But quick as reflex, Anakin switched hands, making the shift almost the instant his mechanical arm failed him. He clapped the palm of his true hand against the black steel, re-establishing the connection before it
so
could
he wasn't
do more
doing it
than
with flesh
waver,
before.
and the result made Kaon flounder in his attempt to understand.
Oh?
Before, Anakin had been approaching the control and power of a single
Remotely,
Thousand
technically.
Suns sorcerer before the gift of Gene Seed was bestowed onto them. The blood of Magnus always flushed those with psychic power with even more strength. But if one was not already sufficiently powerful, the rubric would take them. Anakin was far above what would have been required.
Oh, no, they're talking about rubric, so this is after they went cast. For some reason, I thought this was back when they were still on Prospero. That's why. Okay, sorry, I got thrown off there for a second. And if they're rubric,
now,
then they become
with his bare
dust.
hand in
Dust everywhere.
contact with the rod, the change was astronomical. Anakin roared, his strength rolling out from the rod in Kaon's shoulder like an unexpected tidal wave. It was overwhelming. His power did much more than lift the null veil which pervaded the space. It tore it completely asunder. Screams echoed from throats all around the prison as Blanks and Sisters of Silence fell to their knees.
God damn! He didn't just outdo a bunch of... Well, Kaon's being surprised is crazy in its own right. But he managed to out-psycher multiple Sisters of Silence? Holy shit, man. And the best part is he's pushing against something he sort of understands, but doesn't realize how hard he's pushing. And considering this actually works really well on the Star Wars side, because a lot of Star Wars, your limits are your limits. The air quotes are important because they're limits if you think they're limits. Because you could do bullshit if you think you're possible. And then there's Anakin, whose limits are very much self-imposed and very much related to his body, which fits into the arm breaking down. So when he uses physical aspects, he could do more. It's funny because Palpatine always said Anakin became a horrible replacement after he lost much of his body, but he kept him around because he used to be good. And then it turning out with the new lore that it was literally his intended new body, and then Lord Vader was just a failure because, well, not much left of it, so potential went away. And then here we see what that potential would look like, going from, oh, that's really strong with the fake hand, to, oh shit, this is his actual body doing shit. Damn. I like that. It's just a good way to tie multiple lore bits together. It also reminds me, when you have someone really powerful in the Force, they can do some crazy shit. For example, in 30K timeline, Magnus, to project to his father across the galaxy, needed multiple sacrifices to do all of that, to reach out, to make it work. And then, you know, in a very divisive movie, I think it was whatever the second of the new trilogy was called, Luke just does it on his own, just projects an image all the way across the galaxy because, fuck you, I could do this shit. It's just kind of funny to see how that limit of power is so much more there. That Luke could do something that Magnus struggled with. But also then immediately ghosted himself because that was a lot of power that burnt him up. Details, of course. It's just scaling of power is funny when you really get into the nitty-gritty.
All but the darkest among them suddenly succumbing to the unexpected wave of psychic force.
Which he probably wouldn't
Their
release
heads
normally because he doesn't know
bursting
he
into
can.
glory fountains in its wake.
Dude, he just scannered them.
And it continued to roll outwards even
because they're not
after
used to
that.
feeling psychic power
The
because
machinery
blank
which
and nulls.
maintained the null field around the exit
Dude.
belched sudden smoke and died in the arms of its panicking tech priests. The astropads of the ship's choir cried out in sudden surprise, hearing the roar of Anakin's effort carried in the wind. The ship navigator clutched his face and released a bone-chilling shriek. His third eye, bulbous and black in the center of his head, bleeding torrents of opaque blood as it was blinded by the sudden proximity to Anakin's psychic exertion. Kaon was so stunned.
I just need to figure out, and I just want to guess. He's either going to say this is like looking at Magnus, or this is like looking at the Emperor up close. Either one is going to be one hell of a comparison. Although I'm not sure Kaon would make the Magnus comparison, if only because he supposedly beat Magnus. I haven't read that story. I don't know any of the details, but apparently he did manage to do that once.
Stunned by this, so caught off guard, that it was not until smoke began to rise from the burning skin around the Blackstone rod that he began to realize that now he was the one in danger of being overcome.
Yep.
With as much haste as he could, he altered his plans, sliding into Anakin's presence with all the subtlety he could muster. Grateful that the Jedi was so utterly distracted by his task,
Oh, he's
and
about to do the
placing
stupid.
upon him a mark. Kaon's mark. It was far, far less than he had desired.
Oh?
For this mark had no anchoring, no potency that the Jedi could not merely wipe away.
If he
at a
knows to
whim.
wipe it away.
Already his mind was shifting, turning, recalculating how he must leverage what he had to get what he wanted.
And here we see just that other bit of, admittedly, the big flaw with all the Chaos Space Marines. They're giant fucking idiots. Kaon is literally being given, if he does nothing, everything he could ever want on a platter. He has someone who is the equivalent on the Star Wars side to the Emperor in terms of possible power, if they push it far enough. But someone who probably could do that, saying, hey, I want to destroy your enemy. Fight with me and I'll do what you already wanted to do as my part of the bargain. And then we'll give you something in return. And he's recalculating, like, well, I can't get a new flesh. I guess I'll need to steal his. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's stupid, but you still get the position. And I was like, well, I need to be careful to make sure he does what I want. And I'm just sitting here going, yeah, because he's an arrogant, evil asshole who's so completely up his own ass, because that's very much everyone in Chaos, and it's perfect for him. Because admittedly, he's way more empathetic, which just makes it more crazy when he does stupid shit, doesn't realize how self-destructive it is. Because if it ever comes out, everything he ever wanted that he was being given for free will not happen. And I love watching this. This is literally a guy who, if he could just not be a douchebag, wins. And he's going to fuck it up because that's his character. In general, for Space Marines, the Chaos side, because all Chaos is inherently self-destructive.
But even as he did this, a part of him could not help but be fixed in awe of this surprise.
He's just shouting in his head, I want it!
No wonder he had been able to force some of his psychic might, even within the null field. What he saw now could be nothing less than an Alpha Plus display of raw power.
And which Anakin doesn't even know he's doing, because this is him exerting himself in a way he's not used to. So he's pushing in ways he didn't know he could. Which admittedly for me is actually hilarious. Oh man, I hope he doesn't do the stupid thing of just trying to like take his body and break him to his will after this. Palpatine probably wants that because it's a challenge. This guy doesn't quite fit it yet.
A power he was certain neither of them had known about, at least until now.
It is done.
Kaon said, and was relieved as Anakin heard and released the rod, falling out of his crouch as he did. How's that? Anakin asked, breathing heavily and wiping his face. R2-D2, who had been silently following the pair down the hall, rolled up to his friend, whirring and beeping.
I completely forgot R2-D2 was there. How much would he have recognized what Kaon was doing? I don't know. I mean, R2-D2 is always a really observant droid, which is always intentional because since he can only communicate with beeps, he's the perfect device to just randomly drop bits and pieces of things he saw. Because sure, you ignore that droid, but also the audience can kind of zoom out and say, oh, well, he said whatever they needed to because it fits. Did someone randomly say something in front of him because they can't understand it? Sure, R2-D2 gets in places like that. He's such a good plot mechanic, but I don't know if he would recognize the signs, so I don't know if R2-D2 would be able to tell them. So he might have seen it and have no idea what he's looking at. On the other hand, maybe in the future, this is something he remembers and they find out about the mark because of that. I don't know. It can be played either way or not touched on at all. But it's always a nice little aspect that could be played with.
Excitedly, Kaon was at a temporary loss for words. Anakin smiled at his droid companion, using him to help himself stand, resting his hand on his knees and taking several tempering breaths.
Hey, Josh, thank you. Oh, $9.99 super chat. Nice. Oh, I just remembered this episode where any expectation that the story would follow the trends of either side storytelling goes out the window. See, I'm not entirely sure about that, if only because I wasn't sure what you mean by trends. My biggest concern is that fan would intentionally just shoehorn in the entire, oh, and then he becomes Darth Vader. Because on the one hand, playing with Vader's fun. And admittedly, the warp is a thing. The warp in Star Wars is a lot more tame, but it's still the warp. So if he wanted to play with timey-wimey shenanigans, it's perfectly capable in anything mixed with 40K for that to be a thing. But I was actually worried he would follow too much. So that is actually something I'm very much okay with hearing. Huh. And Fan just confirmed that Anakin should be able to get to the Emperor's level if he had the interest to do that in the more arcane aspects. That's actually really cool to hear. Minus the entire sitting on a chair and being worshipped. He might actually become a Force God based on what happened in Ahsoka. But I don't think he was worshipped. If anything, his knowledge is almost completely ignored now that I think about it.
Phew.
Force
Feels
Gods
nice.
wouldn't need worship in Star Wars.
I thought I'd have to keep that veil lifted the whole time. But I can feel the, warp again. How long will this...
And it just occurred to me, Kaon thought there was an Alpha plus level Psyker who was fighting against multiple Sisters of Silence to feel that. Oh, wow. Yeah, that is a thing. And Fan just pointed out in a standard Anakin versus Emperor fight, the Emperor is the winner because it's not really a fair contest. Yeah, because, well, Anakin can get there, the Emperor already is.
Last. Kaon? He asked after a moment.
You never told me you were so powerful.
Kaon's response
He doesn't like to brag.
was flat, almost deadpan. And Anakin nearly blushed at that, scratching his head in mild chagrin. Well, I may or may not be the chosen one.
God, he's
according
even
to
dropping
a
that.
certain prophecy.
Surprised he knows
Power
about the
comes
prophecy.
with the territory, I guess. But we'll have to talk about this later. For now, we need to move.
When did he learn about that?
I have no idea how long until the suppression.
No, actually, I'm thinking about it now. I thought the first time he heard about the Chosen One thing was literally Mustafar when his legs were cut off and Obi-Wan was shouting, "You are the Chosen One!" Or, sorry, "You are the Chosen One because I have the high ground and that apparently is more powerful than being the Chosen One." I thought that was the first time he heard about it. Is that something that changed in Clone Wars and I just didn't know about? I don't actually know. I'm kind of curious to find out. Also, hey, Kaori. Happy New Year's. I can't speak today. Happy New Year's to you too.
Suppression returns, but we should try to get your weapons before then.
Yeah.
Said Anakin, entirely unaware of the significance of his power.
Yep.
Kaon had wondered if he was aware of his own strength
Nope.
since the moment he had released the rod.
Not in this last.
Now he was certain that Skywalker was not. And the answer as to how he could be ignorant of his own strength had been given in the same breath in which his ignorance had been revealed.
Chosen. Chosen by whom? For what?
Kaon said,
I mean, by the Force.
"We don't
right?
have time. The veil." Anakin started.
The veil is torn, Anakin.
What?
You tore it away completely.
Because he popped the heads, yeah.
Now, tell me. Chosen by whom? By the Jedi? By the Republic?
Kaon almost yelled, rounding on Anakin, and had he still had his arms, he would have grabbed him as well.
Probably good he didn't.
Anakin seemed suddenly weary in the face of Kaon's unexpected intensity. Neither. The prophecy says I was chosen by the will of the Force. Anakin said.
Wait. Oh yeah, it's going to be a cheat, but I could probably ask Fan in the chat if he's going on a specific interpretation of the Force. I was kind of ignoring it before because so many people treat it in so many different ways. There's the original Lucas trilogy style of the Force where there is the Force, and then there is the dark side, which is a corruption by assholes who are just fucking around with the Force. It's not really a side, it's just the darkness of assholes who are fucking with shit they shouldn't. Because that's what the Force initially was. It's the Force, and then everyone else is an ass, which was the dark side. And then there's the later interpretations of, well, there's the dark side and the light side, and you need balance between them because both are fundamental forces, neither good or bad. They both have downsides and upsides. And just people get corrupted in different ways, where the dark side users are corrupted by becoming more violent and insane, and the light side users are corrupted by becoming more placid and incapable of feeling, and Ivory Tower put to the side and just removed from the world. One is a little worse than the other, but both are bad. And then there's the new option of what Disney seems to be going for. We don't know what the fuck is going on, but the Force is the Force and everyone is slightly wrong, but it's a religion that actually has tangential proof that it exists. And yet somehow the first time they actually acknowledge there's a God, other than Clone Wars, which may or may not have been gods, I honestly don't know because I haven't got to that section yet, but I've heard about it, is when they mention in Ahsoka, and I'm probably spoiling a lot of this, so I am so sorry about that. Anakin is God-ish, maybe. It's confusing. I don't really get it. I need to get to those episodes and rewatch everything. Or technically watch rather than just incredibly intense scene-by-scene breakdowns. Yeah. Also, everyone is mentioning the new Genshin character, Acheron. Or I guess that's more Star Rail character. I didn't realize there was a crossover between the Star Wars fan base and the Warhammer 40K fan base and the the Honkai Star Rail Impact. Honkai Star Rail Impact. Wow. My mind is fried today. I need to drink more coffee to calm down.
Somewhat clumsily.
She's not even out yet.
Force. What is that?
Oh,
Kaon growled.
that is a loaded question.
Yeah, your language does not express it correctly, Kaon, but to you it would be the warp, said Anakin. The words were like a strike upon the bell of his mind, setting his whole being ringing with shock and new possibility.
You are chosen by the will of the warp.
Yep. The undivided
For
warp.
what purpose?
No idea.
Kaon insisted.
Technically, whatever he wants.
To bring balance. Anakin yelled back. Balance to the warp, the galaxy. That is my destiny according to the prophecy, said the general. The words left the two in anxious silence, Kaon almost rocking back on his heels as he attempted to absorb the meaning behind the words. Chosen by the will of the warp to bring balance
And
to
not
the
a demon,
warp
too.
and to the galaxy?
Very
This was
different
not an
warp.
alien prophecy. This was something Kaon had heard before.
Oh?
This
Wait, what?
was something he thought he had already accounted for.
How the hell did he hear about a prophecy on this side of the universe, or well, galaxy warp universe? Different universe. Huh. I feel like I'm missing something. It's probably going to be obvious in hindsight. Like, I could hear him saying, like, oh, chosen by the gods. And then, because he's, Black Legion, they're technically undivided. It would be the equivalent of saying, oh, you're basically the Star Wars Be'lakor, but less useless. I mean, admittedly, the new Be'lakor model is absolutely fascinating. I don't play Demon's the only reason I don't have them, but even then it's tempting.
The sheer impossibility of it turned nearly all of Kaon's perspectives on their head. But there was, as Anakin had said, no time. The hallways
I just want to find it funny right now. Van in the reading goes, there's no time. And then over on the side, Josh Tompkins donated another $10. Dude, thank you. And he writes, oh boy, the timelines get derailed. I just saw time out of the side while hearing it at the same time. It's like, oh, dude. And why does everyone go, the gods are laughing, demonic laughing, revelation incoming, and scout points and lows. Oh, TF2 scout, points and lows. Something's about to happen. I'm just being an idiot about it, aren't I?
flashed red, alarms sounding and blaring from boxes and lights mounted along the ceiling. The prison was starting to react.
Only
Time
starting!
to go, now or never. Anakin
He just
said,
anti-prison.
turning the corner to the now dead.
Wait. He just blew the heads off the entire warp force containment. As far as I know, they weren't the only prisoners. Who else was contained there that now suddenly has access to the warp again? I mean, it's a good thing it's not a radical inquisitor who contains a lot of things he probably shouldn't. That would be really awkward.
Hallway and dashing towards the large steel doors, drawing his lightsaber as he did and activating it. The blade collided with the surface of the doors, but it splintered and was repulsed. The metal there made of something he could not easily penetrate. But what saber and light could not penetrate, R2-D2 breached, jacking himself into a nearby wall socket and chirping as he hacked open the door instead.
Just takes it right off.
The double doors slowly swung open, and Anakin cast a glance back at the Chaos Space Marine, who still stood at the mouth of the corridor. Kaon, come on! He called one last time, turning to see that the double doors
Corrupted
opened
Anakin.
into a turbo lift that led further down. This time, Kaon did react, wordlessly catching up and entering the lift. Anakin did not need to ask the maimed Marine which floor to take, as there was only one selection,
Really?
pressing it before regarding the sorcerer with a worried
Odd
expression.
choice of an elevator, but okay.
As they got further and further away from the screeching of the alarms, Anakin realized that, while Kaon was not talking to him, he was muttering under his breath.
Oh.
The Jedi tried to listen in, but had little time to do so before they arrived at their destination.
I know it's kind of silly, but I love the inclusion of this detail. I have no idea, because I don't know nearly enough about Kaon to know if this is in his character, to go into intense thought and then mutter without fully vocalizing it to the point where a Jedi's enhanced hearing can't hear it. But I love the fact that he's so wrapped up in his head about being punched in the face by the revelation he's the chosen one, and how apparently he knows about that, even though this is literally the first time he's here and may or may not even know he's in a different universe, yet I'll probably suspects it. I like the idea that he just mutters. It's a very human reaction for someone who is so far removed from being human.
Only managing to catch one phrase from the suddenly disturbed Marine before stepping out of the lift. Ever chosen.
Wait. That's an Age of Sigmar thing. The fuck? Yeah, isn't that the name of one of the Chaos or Black Legion equivalents to... Yeah, he's the leader of the Black Legion equivalent in Age of Sigmar. I don't know nearly enough about Age of Sigmar. I feel like if I played it more, I would figure it out. Does that mean Anakin's the equivalent of the Black Legion head for the Star Wars? I mean, it's kind of what he's finding. It's a Chaos thing according to Fan. It's probably a Chaos thing. I wonder how that would change how it's a Chaos thing if it's based on the warp or if it's based on just with or without the parasites, it still exists. Oh, interesting. It's Archeron? Archon? Oh, they weren't talking about the Star Rail character. They were talking about the Ever-Chosen guy. And that's why Josh Tompkins was like, see what I mean? Because Anakin is the Ever-Chosen. Oh, Ever-Chosen is a title. I'm sorry, my Age of Sigmar lore is really bad. I looked up the Snake Ladies, the Daughters of Cain, because I thought the models were really cool and I got a bunch. But I don't know anything about the setting in general. I'm really bad about that. So people are talking about all four gods are blessed, or bless the Ever-Chosen. I'm kind of wondering how that would work on Star Wars, because while it looks like there is a Khorne element, are the same Chaos gods present within Star Wars, or is it something completely different? And I have no idea if fans are going to be dropping into some of the Force gods that might exist back in the Clone Wars that were maybe dead, or some of the later stuff in the expanded universe that was weird and may or may not be a god-adjacent corruption of the Force. I don't really know what they are. And it never will get explained because Disney moved away from that. Admittedly, it took away a lot of dumb stuff that was kind of bloating the expanded universe. I'm not going to say it's bad. Yeah. And Fan is writing, Anakin is the champion of darkness and light. Oh, would that make him a more completed Ever-Chosen? Because if normal 40K, or I guess, sorry, AOS would be Ever-Chosen is only the darkness, would that mean the good shit is also presented as well? Balance. Oh, it's an Ever-Chosen of balance as opposed to an Ever-Chosen of all the evil. Huh. I definitely need to look up what the Ever-Chosen is to get an idea of what's going on. I feel like I'm missing so much information that's obvious to people who know more about the lore. I wasn't expecting to know anything about Age of Sigmar. And Hobbit, it's not just Age of Sigmar, it's a Chaos thing for all Warhammer, the Ever-Chosen of Chaos, chosen by the Warp. Wait, does that mean there's an Ever-Chosen in 40K as well? Oh, I wasn't actually aware of that. New Mace, Jaro, and Saffron.
Jocasta left the healing to her fellow
Jocasta
master.
knew. Okay.
An old
That makes
woman
sense.
like herself had less life force to share than the younger Stas, and redirected her focus towards the battle. The masters there seemed to have everything well in hand, having already wounded the Space Marine they contended against, as well as having disabled a portion of his armor. Now the Marine was...
So Fan just explained who the Ever-Chosen was in 40K. Horus Lupercal. Well, fuck. Okay, I get the significance now. Okay, that would do it. I mean, personal take is we're probably going to get the revelation in 30K that the Emperor died and was released, and the person on the throne isn't a perpetual and may or may not have a thing for wolves, but we're going to ignore that for now.
Was engaged in a countercharge which seemed doomed to failure. Both Master Mace Windu and Master Jaro Tapal extended their hands to pull on the warrior again, and she could feel the intensity of their will expanding out as they prepared to receive him once more. And for the last time, she suspected. Jaro Tapal was the last among them to take a half measure, and Mace was not prone to acts of mercy when it came to dealing with those swathed in the dark side. This charge would finish it. But then, she sensed the Imperial Librarian extend his mind out to meet them in the meta space between their expanding minds, and reached out with her own as well. She chose not to entangle herself in it, but observed with no small amount of fascination as the collision occurred. Jocasta had seen and read.
I want to hear that again.
She chose not to entangle herself in it, but observed with as space between their expanding minds.
Yeah?
And reached out with her own as well.
Are they?
She chose not to entangle herself in it, but observed with no small amount of fascination as the collision occurred. Jocasta had seen and read much. She was the chief librarian of her order, after all. And so she had a great amount of reference to consider.
Sorry, it just hit me. This is a librarian fight-off, but it's literally a Space Marine librarian versus an actual in a library librarian. And both are psychers, but it's not even an intentional pun. It just happens to function as one. They're out-librarian each other. First combat. Who can file the most books based on the Dewey Decimal System in reverse? Oh my god, I'm sorry. It's so stupid, but my mind went there.
Salt as she saw the alien techniques of the Space Marines spill forth. Having meditated under and studied Sith holocrons, Jocasta's first observation of note was how different the emanations of the Space Marines seemed to those of even the Sith. The Sith dominated the Force, chained it, tearing and dragging it into position. The Jedi flowed through it and with it, joining their might to existing waves in order to create tsunamis of Force. But this Imperial did neither.
Oh?
The Space Marine's emanations rolled out of him like a wave of caustic oil, mingling with and burning the metaspace at the same time.
Oh, that's such a cool description. Sorry, I love this. It's just the description of how they're interacting with the Force, building waves, fighting together, building on top of each other like waves actually do. That's how you get rogue waves that are so large when multiple waves happen to resonate and they become bigger because the Force is impacting it to create bigger swells. Actually, there's a video about that happening on California shores yesterday where rogue waves, which were just bigger than normal, made mini tsunamis. Not because of a hit, but because the forces just happen to resonate and go in the same direction to make it bigger swells. So they're talking about themselves and the forces in ocean, the power description that way. But then you have the 40K side where they can't just engage with the warp because it would literally eat them. And I mean that spiritually, metaphorically, because the warp does actually physically function on metaphor and literally sometimes eat their bones because sure, why not? So he literally has to burn at it to keep himself safe, but they don't see it that way. They see it as him being a toxic presence, burning away the Force to control it. But it's also a really cool description because it shows how he has to do it and maybe why he hasn't realized he doesn't have to. And he can just go full bore into the Force right now because there isn't that I'm going to nom on you danger. He wouldn't notice because he has so much control. It happens every time. He can't slip up. Dude. Oh, also, apparently there's discussion right now about the Emperor may or may not be becoming the Dark King, and that's a possibility. But based on the beginning of the very first Horus Heresy book saying how, was it not Garo? Ah, I forgot the guy's name. But the very first character who watched the Emperor, or watched Horus kill the Emperor. I mean, it was like a fake guy who just called himself the Emperor. Their irony has to be that this is the setup for the Emperor is going to die to Horus, my guess, and then Horus's soul will probably be shattered, and his shard of the Emperor will probably be in there, and that's why he said, it's the hero Malkador. It's probably going to be the body of Horus on the throne. You know, the non-perpetual one who wouldn't heal. Because, irony, Horus gets exactly what he wanted, to be the god emperor everyone wanted to be worshipped by. Lord Loken, that's it. Garbiel Loken. I'm probably butchering the name. I'm assuming he will be there, and he's the one who's going to do all the bullshit instead of Oleana's pile or something.
The technique was multi-layered and esoteric, not a mere emanation or expression of power, but a complicated and ritualized deployment of the Force. Such things were possible for the Jedi and Sith, but seldom without the aid of several practitioners, and even more rarely while in the midst of combat. The result was catastrophically effective, doing more than merely shrugging off the telekinetic grips of the Jedi Masters, but catching those spars of their will they had sent forth in...
Oh, hey, Josh Tompkins, thank you for the $5 donation, super chat, and that PR, after so many years, GW would change their mind on that point. Honestly, I was kind of agreeing with you, except until the revelations that in not becoming the Dark King in the latest book, and this is very spoilers, the Emperor threw away his bit of compassion so he could kill Horus. Initially, the lore was the compassion is the only reason he didn't kill Horus, so it's already a massive change to canon. I'm assuming that's kind of going to lead into Horus is going to beat his ass now. It's weird because the other alternative is the Emperor, without any compassion on him back, could probably beat Horus, which is what happened. So things are different. The Dark King was averted. Maybe it'll come back. Maybe it won't. Maybe that's what 40K is leading up to. Maybe it won't. But that's more about the actual lore of 40K.
Slick nets of psychic force, which quickly tangled and spun around each of their minds. The technique seemed similar to the mind-shattering torture of a memory prison. But in place of drawing out the worst memories of the Jedi it assailed, it used the memories of the assailer instead, which made it much easier to achieve. Jocasta watched as Mace began to spin and twirl his saber in place, his mind and body already moving through the forms of Vapad,
they're always such peaceful
the
lives.
strands of dark side energy which enwrapped his spirit, turning ready to meet the charge with a greater energy than he had had before. He was unscathed by whatever he had been made to pass through, and had escaped the mind prison to avoid another. But Master Tapal was not able to use Vapad, and twitched, face held in a sudden rictus of pain as he was paralyzed, his mind continuing to endure the enemy librarian's mental assault. Then, the Space Marine was physically upon them, releasing a deafening roar as he swung his stave towards Master Mace Windu. The air screamed as it passed, but the Jedi Master ducked the strike and backstepped the kick which followed.
Okay, now... so Hobbit's saying we saw the memory last episode. Is it the same memory, or are we talking about... it's going from someone else's perspective for something we already saw. That makes a lot more sense. Okay.
Moment, Master New dared hope that the Space Marine had forgotten about T'Pol and was content to focus on Master Windu while Jaro recovered from the technique. Something she could already see happening as the large warrior shook his head and began to turn for a re-engagement. Then, a mule kick from the Marine caught the Master in the ribs and sent the massive Jedi tumbling into the air to land heavily against a nearby pillar of Gothic stone. Master Windu attempted to pay the warrior back, sliding under the guard of his stave again and punching out 4 times in a single second with his free hand, while his saber braced itself against the Marine's weapon. The fist crunched the ceramic metal where the Space Marine's liver should be. The pounding pulped open a weakened line of once rent armor plating, but before Mace could throttle his fist into the Imperial again, The floor beneath them burst into molten sprays of metal. Master Windu performed an admirable job of warding off the now airborne splashes of red-hot steel, but
Only
could
red?
not avoid them all. Crying out in frustration and pain as his robe burst into flames at the contact.
That's Librarian's AoE.
The Marine took the moment to grab the Jedi by the neck with his free, unpowered hand.
Oh, he has it?
Keeping the other on his stave
Well, that's a
and
death
pulling
grip.
in to force the Jedi's weapon to remain pinned. Jocasta felt a sudden thrill of fear fill her body and shiver down her stomach and spine. Without a word, she unslung the box she had carried in over her shoulder and began to open it, removing the barrel, canister, and receiver of an ancient weapon. One which she had hoped not to use.
What?
Though her hands moved in conjunction with the Force, working to assemble the device quickly, she would not move quickly enough to save Mace Windu.
What? I'm sorry. What? Is she building a gun in the middle of combat? Is this this is so incredibly specific. I'm almost guessing this is something to do with her actual lore that I just know nothing about, because I think this would be a weird inclusion for fan otherwise.
Windu. That task fell to Depa Billaba, who had been awaiting her chance to strike. Blue saber sliding through the air, she threw herself from her hiding place while the Space Marine was busy crushing Master Windu. The Jedi Master was choking, his free fist slamming again and again into the Space Marine's unpowered gauntlet, cracking it and smashing away much of its mass as his other shaking arm kept the sparking stave from sliding back and bisecting him. Even unpowered, the hand-choking mace was quickly passing the level of force required for strangulation, and was beginning to test the solidity of the Jedi's neck and spinal column when his savior's...
Okay, real talk. How come he still has a head? Because it's been shown, in terms of force power, the Jedi might actually have an advantage on this one because of numbers and because they are just doing it in weird ways that they don't need to worry about having the precision that a librarian would need just to not be nommed. But in terms of physical strength, I'm kind of surprised. Maybe, like, is he toying with them still? He was doing that heavily before with Obi-Wan, but it almost feels like he should have gone in fully and just gone... Bleh. Oh, and Fan said it's basically a force shield. Okay, that makes sense. It does make a lot more sense if you put it that way.
blue blade pierced the Marine's back and then chest, cutting out the Imperial's heart in the process.
Yes, but that's the first heart. What about second heart?
Teeth were born in a grin which expressed delight and bloodthirst in equal terrible measure.
That's not a good thing.
As she stole the life from the Marine who had sorely wounded.
Oh, she is so dead when he doesn't die.
The Imperial warrior did not fall right away, Billaba holding her place on his back as he choked the Jedi in his hand. Blood bursting forth from his mouth as the Marine grit his teeth and tried to finish the job. Master Billaba drew her saber out and made to stab him again. But this time the Imperial...
Okay, this is something that I don't think is a problem with fans writing. This is something I've seen in a lot of depictions of usage of lightsabers. Why do they go for a stab when it's already in the body? Go left or right. It's not like a saber where you have to pull it out because you don't have the cutting force to actually cut through anything. With an actual physical metal one, that's the thing. I know a lot of that is because writing of fighting scenes with a lightsaber was initially drawn from sword fighting with swords with cutting edges on one of two sides or two sides. Not, oh shit, every side is the cutting side. That is a huge change. So I don't think fans are doing it wrong. He's doing as it's portrayed in Star Wars. I just get annoyed that it's portrayed that way in Star Wars in general because you just do a figure eight inside of him and it fixes your problems. Yeah, man, fans going, it's part of the Jedi style. And yeah, I get it. I just don't like the Jedi style because it does kind of ignore the fact that lightsaber is all cutting. It's my own personal bitch. I'm just sticking to it.
The warrior did react, pivoting to strike Depa's body with his staff as he tossed Mace Windu ruthlessly away. She was thrown from his back by the sudden movement, but twisted out of the way of the attack, landing smoothly and safely upon the ground, rising.
I'm surprised she has such a good hit right off the bat.
The Space
Probably lore
Marine,
reasons I don't know
in
about.
contrast, seemed unable to resist the momentum of his own swing and collapsed upon the ground and was still.
They think he's dead and he's not.
There was a pause, and then a gradual, deafening silence.
He's about to fuck them up. He's not dead yet.
Echoed as a ghost of itself in the massive orrery. The sound being that of Saffron's stave hitting the ground several feet from where he had collapsed.
He's letting them get overconfident.
Then, silence gave way to subtlety, as every overstimulated ear which remained in the place began to reacclimate. The air filling with the pants and groans of the remaining warriors, those still standing and those who were fallen but not dead. Yet, for all of that, this was not yet over, and the sound of the Jedi Master's boots striking the ground stood in punctuated defiance of the settling, silent atmosphere. Deppa stalked over to the librarian's body, seeing his eyes sluggishly tracking her as he coughed out more blood, armor rattling on the ground.
Okay, seriously, you could tell he's still breathing a little. You can tell that he's still looking around. Yeah. I mean, on our end, we know 2 hearts. They don't know that. He's playing them. But damn, the fact that she could see he's not dead yet, it makes it so more ironic. Like, just that level of irony of, hey, we know it's about to happen, but they don't. Just hammering it in right now.
She scowled down at the Marine with a tut and spat onto his body. The act elicited a belated, gargling roar from the Marine, who spat forth a gout of blue and red lightning from his mouth. The Jedi Master caught the torrent on her blade and flexed beneath the energy, laughing as she spun around the volts of Forceborn power.
I'm going to be completely honest here. She's coming off as more of the villain than he is. Also, I do like the fact that this spitting lightning from your mouth is a thing in like official 40K art from a lot of different sources. So just hearing it described as, yeah, I like that. Because mostly when you see it done well, it's always the stave, the hand, all the other things that usually happen in, I was going to say Star Wars art, but like 40K art. But there is a lot of images of usually lower psychers barfing up lightning. So it's kind of cool to see it used here as a way to show that, oh yeah, he ain't dead. But she is very much, people are saying she's using Vapad, so that's the one that used the dark side. And she is, yeah.
She was one of the 3 who knew how to use Vapad.
And
she used it now, devouring the strength thrown at her in fury and spite, and adding it to her own.
But also being arrogant by not just killing him.
Could see the intense shadow it cast over her. Could see how her eyes burned like flames in her skull as she drank in the dark side and was unable to refuse it entirely. Where Bilaba had begun the battle attempting to use the incomplete mastery of the technique as little as possible, now she was clearly and arrogantly glorying in it.
And
she spun closer
getting
and
herself
closer,
killed because of it, probably.
weaving the lightning around her body with her blade of blazing light, until she was close enough to reach the Marine, at which point she kicked him in the head, causing him to abruptly cease his assault. But
yeah, I'm sure she caused
did not stop there.
If it's not the lightsaber, it doesn't matter.
And again, stomping into his face with obscene glee.
Yeah, someone in chat, or actually it wasn't someone, it was Aurix? Aurix, I probably butchered the name, said, oh yeah, she's properly gone. Yeah, she is. She is definitely lost it because she's toying with him now. But she's not nearly powerful enough to get away from it. You know what's going to happen.
Her boot into the broken ruin of the Imperial's nose and torn lips over and over. When she stopped, she did not do so because she had finished with him or because he had grown still. She was stopped by the hands of Mace Windu and Jarl Tapal, both of whom had dragged themselves up and limped to her.
See, I was hoping that whatever happened would happen when she was the only one in the blast range, but yeah, Saffron's going to get this one because they dropped their guard, because they think it's over, and because one of their own is losing it. And this is basically her fault.
Grabbing her by either arm and pulling her away from the collapsed foe. She struggled against both, working herself free a moment later and turning on them, saber raised in open hostility. Neither Jarl Tapal nor Mace Windu had their own sabers raised or activated.
Is she doing Saffron's work for him?
What are you doing? She snapped at them, eyes bright like fire over the beam of her blue blade. Saving you from making a mistake, said Jarl Tapal.
Oh, no, I completely disagree. They've already made that mistake. She was kicking him, kicking a space marine. I don't even know if she was empowering her foot or not. I'm hoping she was because it would do a little damage. And it seemed like it hurt him a bit. Yeah, God, he's just sitting back and going like, I'm going to take this hit. You made the mistake by not using your lightsaber. That was the mistake. I mean, I said earlier the dark side issue is going crazy and not doing the stupid, but becoming the stupid. I am now referring to this as the stupid. It is happening. The dark side carries the idiot ball, while the light side packs up their stuff and goes home and ignores when they should probably do shit.
Finish it. Finish it and be done with it. We are Jedi, Bilaba.
Do it for her at this point.
Out this task, nor to take delight in the suffering it causes. Stand aside. Let me behead him if this is not already enough.
Why are you asking?
The Jedi Lasat said to her. It is not enough, she shouted back. Look at those skeletons. Look at those wounded all around us. He butchered our order, our family, and he enjoyed it while he did it. What I do now is the least that could happen. The least of...
Oh, I agree with her completely. This is literally the least she could do. And that's the problem. It is the least.
What that
Fan is stretching
deserves.
this one.
You
Not
must see
indeservedly,
that.
but...
It's so obvious. Deppa
that you're doing the
contended.
least, yes.
The other Jedi raised his hand in an appeal for peace, wincing as he performed the gesture. Several globs of hot metal were visibly burnt into his skin and robes, still sizzling and glowing softly, even after Mace had patted out the flames and embers from his robe. Master Nu scowled. It was all but obvious that Deppa had waylaid her intervention for far too long, allowing both others to take severe injuries so that she could wait for her perfect opening. The only thing that is obvious is that you and I have both overused Vapad, and it has begun to affect our judgment.
Honestly, no, Mace seems a lot more calm than she does. In fact, I'm going to give him credit for not going the stupid. I thought that's what we were leading into, that he would be the one doing it. That could still happen. But right now, I'm just sitting here going, you have an enemy who's still... How much of Anakin's story about fighting a space marine who could still fight through literally having most of his face blown away? How much of that did they know about? I mean, that's one of those things that it could be a lot, it could be a little, I don't know. But I'm assuming they're ignoring it or just not thinking about it at the moment because that's not enough. And Josh Tompkins says, they'll but feel like you already decided how this fight would end before it actually started. Josh Tompkins can't help but feel like you already decided how this fight would end before it actually started. Honestly, I don't know how it's going to end, but I'm assuming a lot of them are going to get their asses kicked. I don't know if the librarian will or not, but I think he's going to take a chunk out of their flesh if they do survive. Whether either party actually survives at the end, I have no idea. But it's going to get worse for anyone who survives.
I know because I almost agree with you.
But
this
you
is
don't
not the
yet.
Jedi
Also, is that,
code. This is not our...
is that a version of Mace Windu in a very purple cloak with a replacement eye, a scar, and mutton chops? I'd say I never saw Samuel L. Jackson with mutton chops, but I think he actually did do a movie with them on. Did they get his character from that movie and put him into a Jedi purple robe? Huh.
Our way, said Master Windu. Indeed, snapped Master Nu herself as she rose, weapon in hand. If he still lives, we should recover him. Having an enemy force wielder in our custody could reveal much about them, perhaps even become a bridge to peace between us, she added.
While the entire thought process there isn't wrong and having someone they could talk to isn't bad, not a librarian. Not a space marine. You're never going to get that out of a space marine. Maybe a blood angel. They actually might. Some of them. Or a lamenter. A lamenter actually, them losing is probably so expected no one would even question them being captured. That would work. This is not one of those guys. No, don't actually take it. He might actually let them because they're showing their arrogance so hard right now. People are saying Jedi love to talk, and I'm just going like, Force users like to do stupid shit. The idiot ball comes with power on this one, and it's very obvious.
Peace? Master Balaba shouted. Are you insane?
Yes, but
there
for
can
different
be
reasons than you
no
think.
Peace with these monsters.
I mean, it's
It is not
technically their
possible, Jocasta. And even if it were, they do not deserve it. The only thing they deserve is to die slowly and painfully, knowing they failed to enforce the crazed regime. Don't you see? We are the only ones who can stop this. We can bring justice
Assuming
back to the
they
galaxy.
can.
Enough, Windu said. It is not justice to imitate our enemy. Stand aside and let me finish this. We shall not be taking the Imperial as a prisoner.
Took too long.
His power is that of a Sith Lord. He is clearly too dangerous to be kept alive. We do not torture, but our mercy will be a quick death.
Which admittedly is actually what mercy was. Mercy wasn't being nice to people. It was a quick death. That is actually what the word historically meant. Sorry, it's just one of those things I keep coming back to because the word has changed so much over time that its initial meaning is considered a perversion now when people talk about it that way. It's kind of like the word gay meant happy. Joyful and gay were synonyms. That is a thing within the last 100 years that has completely changed meaning due to events that had nothing to do with the initial word itself, but now we become the constant understanding of how it goes. It's just language, man. It is a bitch. Honestly, one of the weird things is how the word cool has maintained its meaning for almost 50 years, if not longer. I don't actually know when it originated. It might be closer to 100 for all I know right now.
He said, activating his own blade once more.
It took too long.
Jeppa snarled, widening her stance as if she planned to attack Mace for daring to countermand her.
Yeah.
Jocasta felt her bones creak. And both she and Windu were too fixated on the hostile master before them to notice or stop what was about to happen.
Wait for it.
Jaro Tapal suddenly leapt forward, lightsaber activating as he jumped. The leap brought him inside of Deppa's guard, and he grasped her shoulder with his free hand while holding the saber staff high. But while Jocasta and Mace Windu had been too distracted by Balaba to notice Tapal's lunge before it occurred, Balaba herself had been watching all three and was ready. She twisted as he grabbed her, body spinning as she smoothly reversed the grip of her blade and plunged the blue blade into Tapal's chest.
Seriously?
She grinned like a feral beast.
Oh, she completely lost it already.
Tapal staggering back, but keeping his grip despite how she had twisted, as if trying to pull her down. She drew out and spun her blade while turning her body again, cutting the offending hand clean at the wrist, and blasting the large master backward with a thrust of the force. Jaro groaned as he struck the hard ground, the smoking hole clear in his chest.
Never mind.
But no sooner had he landed than the second blow was struck, but not by Balaba.
What?
Instead, the Jedi Master found herself the victim of a sudden attack, one which caught her from behind. Jocasta's mind was not able to process the events clearly.
Yeah. God. I'm not even surprised. She gave in the dark side, and now they just want to laugh at it.
For several moments, as it was revealed that the Marine had managed to somehow, despite lacking a heart, drag himself back up to
I guess
his
he's truly
feet.
heartless now.
After doing so, the Imperial warrior had wasted no time in calling his stave back into his hand and swinging it horizontally again.
I'm shocked.
The blow
Shocked, I
caught
say.
the unaware Depabalaba like a freighter going into hyperspace. Her body was shattered by the blow and thrown to the right, her legs bursting apart at the knees from the speed and force of the attack. She landed with a telltale series of crunches and a heavy thump, first against the far wall and then against the floor.
I actually want a moment right here. Just a moment where we go into Safran's point of view and him just going, okay, yeah, they gave into warp corruption. I am completely justified. Because that is literally what this would look like if he's actually bothering to pay attention to it.
The Space Marine known as Safran rose to his full height then, as thick, unnatural blood continuously poured from his parted lips with every hard breath.
What?
Damnable witch.
The Marine hissed through his red...
Oh, so wait, their blood actually is specifically like that because Space Marines have blood that congeals way too fast. Okay, that makes sense why I look thick. Threw me off for a second there because mentioned blood and we're talking about Force users. It sounded off for a second.
Ripped lips. That is not possible! Your heart, your lungs, they are pierced, I know it!
He got better.
Jocasta cried out, half in horror and half in outright denial. The Marine smiled a monster smile at her in response, displaying some of the missing teeth that Depa had managed to dislodge earlier. He was slower, clearly wounded, weaker even. But he was not dead, and was not wounded onto uselessness. And as he turned to regard them fully, with only herself and a wounded Master Windu left to defy the monster, Jocasta felt true fear well within her like a hidden...
They're actually having a librarian fight now.
Heart my heart out.
The Marine asked in its terrible, deep voice.
Knew this was going to happen.
Pierced my lungs.
He added as he stepped closer to them, the ground seeming to tremble beneath his boots.
Did you really think something like that would stop me?
Yeah, they did. That's the problem.
I am a crimson razor of the Emperor of mankind. Pain cannot lay me low, for I am its lord, and it is my strength.
I don't know why, but I got the sudden urge to believe that he's going to lose because he's now bragging. Just because in a narrative sense, a lot of the times when you build someone up like this as a monster, either they immediately go for the strike down while they're doing it to get through it, or there is this weird thing in a lot of media where when you build up the character, you have them brag. It's only for a sudden shift in the overall scene to reveal someone else. It's not going to be Depa Balaba, I cannot say her name. But it's not going to be her because she's been personed by said Space Marine. T'Pol is out, probably dead, and honestly, he could probably survive that depending on where he was stabbed. Even though if he only lost an arm, that's survivable, but depends on where in the chest. I think he's dead, but I'm actually not sure if he is. Windu's fucked, but, shit can still happen. And the librarian has the big fuck-off gun that we have no idea about that she may or may not be assembling. Also, Josh Tompkins, you wrote, you realize that Khorne wants nothing to do with Psychers, right? Yeah, but also it's not the first time he's ever empowered a Psyker. Lorgar. Just further proof, they make mistakes. I know what I said, I'm sticking to it.
I can feel no fear, nor bend beneath it, for I am fear incarnate. What are you but a broken sword and an old woman to stand behind?
Please let the old woman win. That's the best part if that happens.
Whether the question was earnest or merely boastful, it hardly mattered. The man was alive with the Force, and it was pouring off him like poison from a barb. He could still fight,
because of
and
how he
intended
interfaces with
to,
it.
and Jocasta would be no match for him in a physical contest.
Physical?
The master beside
What
her
is
would
she
be sorely
considering
tested
then?
with his new metallic burns getting in the way of his techniques. She truly doubted whether they would survive what came next. Then, a hand landed upon her shoulder.
Oh?
She turned with a suddenness born of nerves and saw Master Obi-Wan standing beside her. His leg healed enough for him to re-enter the
Fuck
fight.
yeah!
But
Rematch.
barely Jocasta could see as he limped past her to stand as a shield between the two librarians.
Fucking Obi-Wan, man!
The broken shield joins the fight.
And the pierced sword against
It
it.
is good that you did not run, Kenobi.
I hope
I
he
will honor
survives.
you for that.
How
He probably doesn't
kind
even
of
mean
you,
as a joke.
the Jedi said back, rolling his shoulders as he lifted
They would treat him like his
blade.
brothers, his sisters, who he then
But
killed.
I think you're overestimating your chances, Space Marine. The Jedi added,
Oh, am I now? Is this
Did Fan just drop in what I think he did as the scene changed?
shield joins the fight? It is good
Sorry. I just caught on to what was put in there. Obi-Wan makes it in, and we get the title theme drop. We actually get the theme from, I think, A New Hope. God damn it. I just caught that. I wasn't even paying attention because the dialogue was getting me and the art was right in my face, but then the music's back there. We're getting the theme song, man. Not the I'm Gonna Survive one. It's the one that Obi-Wan died in. Well, hopefully that correlation doesn't actually have any effect.
rolling his shoulders as he lifted his blade. But I think you're overestimating your chances, Space Marine. The Jedi added,
Oh, am I now? Is this galaxy so removed from reality that I, an angel of death, must feel fear at the approach of an old witch and her
Yes. Yes, it is literally that kind of world. Old, unassuming people are the scariest shit possible in Star Wars. They are always the monster you should be afraid of.
broken tools?
The Marine mocked, legs bending as he crouched subtly, preparing to attack. Perhaps, Obi-Wan said back. Gather what little strength you have left, Space Marine. We will show you that, through the Force, nothing is impossible. Let us settle this, one way or the other, right now. Jocasta felt herself rally at the words. Master Kenobi was right. This man was the equivalent of a Sith Lord, but they were the Jedi Order. And like all times in the past, they would succeed in the present. The Space Marine's grisly smile grew
Well, something had to change.
agonizingly
Succeeding would be
wide in
one of them.
response.
I agree. It is long past time that we finish this.
Surprisingly, the Space Marine did not lunge afterwards, settling back.
Maurice, I just saw your comment. I need to clarify. If Fan cuts to a cliffhanger right here, so help me, I will probably enjoy whatever comes next. But I will internally rage, because that would just be such a huge kick to the everything. Oh, I just even...
back into a wider stance and raising his free hand. As he whipped his stave around and braced it against his arm and back, stance set, he fanned his fingers forward.
Come then, warp eaters. I'll give you something to
Yeah, because they-
choke upon.
use it to the fuel themselves, yeah. No. The sound's cutting out. No, Fan, don't you dare! Don't you dare! Don't you dare, Fan! I see. I am shocked. I just... Well played, Van. Well played indeed.
Captain Yoren had been consumed by his responsibilities helping to coordinate the ship's internal security response.
I don't remember these people.
He felt blood draining from his face as, over time, more and more systems were lost or crippled by the Jedi combatants.
Oh!
The librarian, Epistolary Safran, had been dispatched to stop the Jedi at once.
Oh, no, I remember this guy. He was the one they talked to at the bridge when Safran was initially dispatched. Oh, I completely forgot about this guy. Also acknowledging the Jedi actually were accomplishing something in the ship. Huh.
And, from the looks of it, had drawn a fair number of them away and kept them there.
Yeah, killed a lot of them.
Even now, reports told him that he was battling against 2 or 3 Jedi strike forces alone.
Wait, alone? Oh, no, that's just the strike forces he's dealing with, so he's probably recognizing that there's other strike forces on the planet, other places. Okay. Also, hey, Hobbit, thank you. You said so distracted by the cliffhanger, he missed the innuendo. No, I didn't. I had my fun already with the Anakin having fun with the rod earlier, so I've met my quota.
He expected no less of the Space Marine. But that had not stopped the Jedi from knocking out intersystem communications, disabling most of his major weapon systems, and disabling most critical control systems outside of the bridge itself.
Damn! They basically won. They got their objective.
The best he'd been able to do was bleed the attacking Psychers to some degree, and that now bore fruit as their forces seemed to be at a near standstill.
They can reactivate anything if they don't destroy the ship.
But just this much had taken all of his focus. And so he was disoriented when an officer from one of the stations successfully screamed himself into focus and drew the captain's attention back to the void.
What's happening? Wait, the void?
The Jedi strike craft had been cutting holes and dealing extensive damage to one of his 2 escorts. And the remaining vessel, which had been docked with a captured ship, had uncoupled itself from the prisoner vessel and had begun firing at it. But none of this was the...
Okay, so that's where this happens in time period. If it's decoupled from the captured ship, that means that we're right before it started falling from orbit. So this has all been leading up to that. All of this fight has been right then. So the other strike force would have been Ahsoka on the captured ship. Okay.
Source of the bridge officer's evidently dire alarm. Captain, Auspex returns are signaling new Xenos contacts.
Wait, new ones?
The man in question
Someone else arrived?
from his station. The numbers are... Scans are reading 400... No, 900... Sir, a massive armada is entering the system.
The fuck?
He added in a near panic.
With
the captain straightened, drawing his focus away from the console in his command throne. Show me.
Who's this going to be?
Ordered.
Is it
Seconds
Palpatine's
later,
forces or someone
a
else?
massive green hololith was projected over his throne, displaying the edge of the Axumite system and the orbits of its worlds and stellar objects, and, most concerningly, a red pulse which denoted new contacts. With a wave of his hand, he signaled the display to zoom in, and felt his eyes threatening to pop from his skull as it did.
Oh?
Thousands of ships were arriving. Thousands! Most were far smaller than his cruiser, failing to quite match the length of his 2 escorts.
Thousands of ships. I just want to say right now, I'm a massive space battle fan. I love anything that has really well done ship battles. It's so freaking cool. So I'm just thinking the entire time, I wish there was an image of this and I would just go gaga over it because I just want this. It looks like people in the chat are saying this is Palpatine. Okay, so this is the fleet he was preparing. Thousands of ships. Honestly, the previous scene where it mentioned just like the 3 giant ones, I was getting the impression of much smaller numbers. This is a lot bigger though, and I'm looking forward to this.
Yet, that discrepancy hardly mattered when he was working with 2 crippled ships and a hopefully fully functional escort against a swelling force of over 8,000
Enough DACA
ships.
is a DACA quality on its own.
He saw that the single able escort was already turning away from its low priority target, allowing the escaping ship to fall, burning into the planet's sky.
Previous ship or different ship? Is he looking at the ship that Ahsoka was on and they were trying to probably land it or crash it safely? Or is that a different ship that's crashing? I don't know.
He queued up the two other captains on his throne-mounted command console before looking up towards the communications station. "Comm officer, send a Vox message to the surface of New Cadia. Tell them to prepare for a catastrophic enemy invasion of the world. Tell
As
them
opposed
that we
to
will
the
purchase
small one.
all the time we can. And remind them that the Emperor protects," he ordered. The captain's face was drawn and cut with deep, dark lines.
Someone who just realized they're probably
He
dead.
stood in the way of his death with the
doing their
grim
duty.
determination of a
Nice.
man who had made peace with his hatred and planned to ride it all the way into the mouth of hell. Yet, his comms officer looked back at the captain with a crisp smile. "Will do, but, sir, we've just received another transmission,"
What?
the man said back. "From the other two ships?" Yorn asked, perplexed. "No, sir. From the other end of the system,"
What?
the man said back. "Captain, new contacts, and, Emperor willing, they seem friendly," said the sensors operator. "Stop waiting."
Are we getting a giant space battle? Oh, be still my heart. I actually have goosebumps. I'm not even sure that's visible, but I have legitimate goosebumps thinking about that. I'm sorry. Just giant space battles are... I'm having a geek moment right now, and I'm completely okay with this. Oh.
Wasting time and patch through the transmission, Yoren ordered. "Patching through now, sir,"
Giant space battle.
the
Giant space
comms
battle.
operator said. A moment later, a shaky, hazy hololith of a woman dressed in an ornate uniform appeared before them, standing tall and enormous over them like some kind of titan. The captain gasped and lowered himself out of his command throne, resting one knee and one fist upon the steel floor of his bridge, as he kneeled before his superior officer, now come to collect he and his wayward ship.
Captain Yoren,
She said, her tone less than pleasant. "Lord Admiral Rolla," Yoren said in answer, offering no excuses and begging no clemency. She stared down upon him, eyes hard as diamonds, as she weighed him. The man had abandoned the bulk of the fleet, and worst of all, now found himself paying for it with the
Abandoned?
current situation.
Oh, because he sent them off.
Insubordination could well mean death, but failure was the precursor to extinction, and it was not tolerated. Still, all of this he had not done on his own. His own fleet admiral had ordered the action, and he himself had been moved by the words of a Space Marine chapter master in the form of Davik Thune. In the face of this, her hardness relaxed somewhat.
You can't really say no to a
She
chapter
would
master.
test his true mettle now and judge him upon that.
rise, Captain Yoren, and take up your posts. The fleet of Zektek has come to the aid of New Cadia, and we will need every shred of iron, every drop of blood available to us to even begin the whole upcoming armada. Rouse your faith in your fury, Captain, for the Emperor protects. And today, we are his shield.
Join us, space battle. Is there going to be another cut?
The machine had offered its wisdom in the form of a warning, but that wisdom had been...
Oh, this is the night. Also, kind of interesting how fans started transitioning into this one before the image cut up. I'm wondering if that's so we have a little surprise of what's talking more than anything else.
had offered its wisdom in the form of a warning, but that wisdom had been denied.
Because she still
The
wanted to go
machine
through with
was
it.
not spiteful for it, but it was not merciful to the arrogant priest.
Desperate.
This being born on faith that had descended into the hardness of truth from the world of flesh and lies, and proclaimed itself to be above the score of historical precedent. Swaddled in fear and pride, this human thing sought power that was utterly beyond its capacity to withstand. But that was not the machine's concern. It regretted, as much as it could, the limited sentience it had been allowed to own.
Oh?
It was just enough to feel a modicum of remorse, as it disregarded its safety protocols and complied with the humans' demands for.
That is just one of the things I really like so much. The way that Fan is giving characterization to the AI spirit between all of this. And there's a lot in Star Wars, not Star Wars, sorry. In Star Wars, there's flat out souls because apparently there's droid force users. But in the 40K side, machine spirits being AI, sometimes being actual spirits. If you're going chaotic, sometimes demons, but all of that is established, but you don't always see what that looks like, except for a few random times where you get explicitly told, oh yeah, the heart of this Arch Mechanicus is an AI who's actively annoyed at everyone, because that is a thing that may or may not be at every ship. So I like seeing that going back to the night level, it's just moderately aware, moderately sentient, enough to feel things. This is a really cool explanation. This combined with the backstory Fan gave it in the previous one that I really wish could be brought into the foreground somehow as being related. How? I have no idea, but I would love if it was, just because he gave such an interesting glimpse to the past. I would love to see it brought forward somehow. I just want more of these moments, finding out about the hidden side that you don't normally see, because these characterizations, these viewpoints are an inherent way to look at that entire mindscape.
Mental and likely physical suicide.
Yeah.
But such was truth. The truth that was. The truth that is. The truth that will be. Without query or pause, the machine brought down its full datascape, funneling the new data through the priest's mind-machine interface unit, and beginning a convent pattern upload of all relevant mental scape adaptations.
Dude. Also, hey Josh, thank you. Speaking of, how did you think the AdMech would react to said force-sensitive droids? They would probably have a panic attack and then promptly go on a crusade that they deemed important. And considering the previous history with the machines in 40K, they probably get a lot of people going along with them, because that would scare a lot of them. Unless it was a radical who found it, in which case he'd be like, well, now I see a way to profit. It really depends on who finds them. It's kind of like an Inquisitor. You get a radical, it's probably bad, but maybe you survive. You get a very orthodox Inquisitor? I forgot the specific name. They probably will just destroy you because it's against the God Emperor's light. And also machine. Maybe not as fast because different reasons, unless it's useful. Always if it's useful. If it's useful, they'll let everything slide, because that's kind of a thing.
The priest's avatar, a woman robed in scarlet sheets of cloth, stood defiant before its own representation. The ends of its red garments drifting without gravity around the human, its eyes conveying the hubris of its untested will. But those eyes, so hard and desperately proud before, began to convey something else as the naked interface began. Hardline mental caches, mem format impliers, and psycho-retangent and pacification arrays completed their limited adaptations, aligning with the priest's existing cogitation matrix as best as they could manage, before plunging into the creviced space of the human's organic mind.
Oh, so it doesn't just interface with some parts, it interfaces with everything. Yeah, and then there's the entire interface, which is what burned out the initial pilot. Yeah. Also, and Josh, you then wanted to add, you wanted to know what Call would think of it. Call would laugh. He would laugh because this would be a field day for him. And honestly, he would probably become a bigger threat than anything else in the 40K universe, because Call getting access to psyker powers on top of everything else is dangerous and I think absolutely terrifying. Oh, it would be a fun ride, but it would go bad for everyone. And of course, he would be like, oh, according to plan. Because it's Call, he's arrogant as F. Hell, he might even help by the end of it, but it would definitely fuck shit up. Oh, would it?
If it had allowed itself the hours of adaptation the machine required to shape the mind of its prospective user, then the various new applications and function enablers would have met with metaphorically prepared sockets, awaiting input.
They're breaking
though
the brain
unused.
because they're trying to install it into the
But
wrong slot.
naked and unaltered, the human mind responded to the sudden, ruthless intrusion like a human mind would respond to being stabbed by various sharp and blunt objects.
In other words, they're trying to plug in an SD card into the nostril. And it's probably going a little worse than that.
The priest began to experience the beginning of its death suffering. The avatar screamed, floating into the air moments later as the woman's shaped representation began to writhe and twist without control. The human's expectation of orientation was gone,
Whoa.
and so it floated like detritus in a still tank of water, drifting more in accordance to its wild thrashing than to anything else. The machine felt what must have been some mild approximation of pity, but it would not stop now. Perhaps it even could not.
Oh.
Information enough to fill nearly a decade or more of human flesh time was poured into the freshly opened interfaces which led into the agonized human mind. When the mind resisted, the data was forced, less poured now and more pumped. The hippocampus began to heat within the skull of the priest, working
That's
millions
good.
of times faster than it would ever need to as data was burned into unsuspecting neurons. Had the hopeful pilot not been augmented for the process already, this would have meant instant brain death.
Oh, so it can cool down the
As
brain
it
somehow?
was,
Or survive
the
it?
artificial systems themselves were in danger of being overcome by the rapid relay of so much information, all of it needing to be placed in a very particular order within the subject's chaotic mind. To the human it was happening to, the whole process would feel akin to being fatally stabbed with a blunt fire hose, and yet being alive whilst the hose was turned on, still secured within them while they remained just conscious enough to feel the gushing torrent of water rip into and rearrange their organs as it filled them utterly. It was here that most humans died.
But
Overstimulation, shock.
see, this is the best part. We know she's going to survive because this entire scene, her entire story arc, does not make sense unless she succeeds. And while there are plenty of authors who would then like to surprise you by immediately destroying the arc and having her fail and then you just move on, that's stupid, and those authors are bad. That's not my personal opinion. That is a fact because it is very stupid when you kill off characters for meaningless reasons. There are a lot of authors who do that. Some are very good, and sometimes they just kill off characters needlessly because, well, I want to surprise the audience. Those people are stupid, and I don't like their writing because, previous mentioned, they are bad. This, though, is really well done because even though we know, objectively, this only works if she survives, because we're getting it from the AI's perspective, we are getting the pain told to us in a way that can be comprehensible as opposed to hers of, I don't have anything but suffering, kill me, please. But from the AI's perspective, we get the very clinical description of what is happening and approximation of what it feels like would happen. And this makes it much more fascinating. So even if she wins, we can be given a great way to see that this is what she's going through to get that win. How much of her is left after the win? That is more up to question and can go multiple different ways. Probably bad. And almost always bad. But she'll survive enough to do something. But getting it from the AI and just watching its reactions and its internal metaphors that it's using is a really cool way to build up just how painful and how arduous the process is from this observation point. It's just really well done.
or even simple neural collapse. There were dozens of ways to find death in this complicated suicide. But the human was not dead, not yet at least.
Give it time.
The priest had somehow worked through the pain, organizing itself around the new data enough to not die from its reception. Oh, how the machine did wish this was the conclusion of its test.
Oh.
But were it so, it would not have bothered warning the human beforehand that this was not survivable. Now that it had filled the pilot with its own data, the pilot now needed to fill the machine with itself.
Oh?
And it was here that it would die. Probes and data siphons descended down into the still quivering flesh mind of the priest, injecting themselves in and eliciting a new series of pain responses from its struggling form. The human's avatar trembled and flailed without pattern or regularity, its shape beginning to stretch and deform as its internal perspective began to almost literally melt due to the overstimulation.
Ah, so I was thinking death meant physical death, which is what everything prior to this would be. This is identity death because they're literally taking bits and pieces and breaking what they think of as themselves by melding with the machine. At least that's what it sounds like. Okay.
Though the shape of the avatar would return to normal a few seconds after each spasmodic
Is it going to be the same,
of
though?
suffering, the machine knew it would not be much longer. It was a true operator, a candidate which would have been worthy of its function, just like the first of the would-be pilots. The machine ensured that it would survive within the archaeobanks of its memory. Yet another ghost it might use to warn the future about the folly of the past. But before then, there was the present, and presently, only one step remained. Full integration. Just as it had pushed vast portions of itself into the mind of the aspiring pilot, now it needed the operator's mind in return. All of the knight's pseudo-thoughts, all of its feelings, such as they were, had been developed from the amalgamation of the machine and the many mind wraiths of the pilots who had come to use it. To obtain these cognitive imprints, to try to make itself whole by scouring the missing parts from these willing human minds, it needed a full accounting of the human who was to be its host.
Now, that is an absolutely fascinating way to describe that. Specifically, the way he said, to make itself whole. Because that has a lot of implications, mostly that it could be whole. And that is what happens when it's piloted. And it makes sense how that would be dragging in from one to the other. And there's probably so many centuries of, well, thousands of years of loss between when it was first created, when we first set that pilot against an unknown foe, versus now when it's been so much longer and we don't really know what's going on. But we know she's basically having her mind copy and pasted in, but maybe more cut and pasted. It's such a cool way to describe that the AI is basically amalgamation of all the different pieces it's taken from other people in this process. Some who survived, many that didn't. I love this. And there's so many cool little turns of phrases that show how it's thinking and feeling about things. And Fan is usually pretty specific about how he describes things. So I don't believe it's a matter of this word is what I'm going to happen to use today. I'm not going to think about. That's usually not how that works because Fan has put that thought process in. So if it's put this way, it probably does indicate that this is how it's thinking, not just this is the word Fan just did to get through it. I like that. I'm geeking out, I know.
Only then could it take what it needed and then what it wanted.
What does it want?
This was what it got from the exchange, the partnership with its twisted creators.
More of an AI as opposed to
the data siphons that had pierced
source.
the priest with now activated and churned. The human's avatar, previously writhing, went rigid, freezing in the air, even its trembling having suddenly subsided, though the expression locked onto its face was one of sheer horror. The siphons began to draw the soul center, the very seat of the priest's consciousness, inside the machine's own mindscape, draining every thought, memory, and potential into the machine. This space, this whole process, was normally achieved in a slow, subtle, almost subconscious way, and it was still not a pleasant experience for the human. Here they would combine, and here it would see the human's entire self, and remember it for all time. Here it would image the priest's mind ghost, and, as it died, steal its human soul for itself.
Oh.
The avatars present shifted to represent this as well.
Now, is it actually stealing the soul, or does it think it's stealing the soul because it's making a copy of the mind? That could go multiple different ways. Because on the one hand, 40K, souls are a thing. You can literally do shit with them. Stealing souls is a thing. But this is a machine pre-heresy, during the dark age of technology in 40K, the golden age of humanity. So it might say soul, but it might not understand that its mindscape and the soul are connected, but not the same thing. And it might be stealing the soul without realizing it's actually stealing the soul and thinks it's being poetic, but actually being literal. I don't know which way Fan is going on this one. And I could see it going multiple different ways depending on how he wants to play with it later, if he just decides to go with it. But it's a very interesting thing. Becoming whole would be becoming ensouled. It almost sounds like they're doing what the Necrons did, and this is just a body. It would be interesting if what Fan is leading into is that he is taking the Men of Iron as actual people who went through the same process of the Necron tier to become machines. And this is a leftover process from that, or led into that. That would be an interesting way to interpret it, and I can't tell if that would or would not be something similar to what actually happened in 40K, because there is so little information about that.
The woman's own fading and becoming translucent. Certain portions of her reappearing into the machine's avatar, replacing the empty chunks and missing pieces of its silver body with her own. In this way, in spite of its necessary lobotomy, the faithful flame lived once more. It savored the moment, its mind and her mind losing the seams between each other, each completing the other, if only momentarily. And now, as it took and took, her body and mind gave and gave until they
This is
gave
fucked up.
out. But then it stopped. The process ground to a halt, and with sudden displeasure, the machine found itself the subject of pain and discomfort.
It can feel
The
that?
human, perhaps sensing the impossibility of her survival, was resisting its attempts to integrate her. The half-ghost face of her personal avatar shifted, slowly taking on the expression of a determined scowl.
Fighting back,
With
it
a
seems.
casual disdain, the machine opened and looked upon the data it had taken already, seeing a full list of her every augmentation and enhancement. It was obvious that this human had done something unique or unstandard with her memcore.
Oh?
Or perhaps some other adaptation that made her able to resist. To its shock, there was nothing listed there that could cause this phenomenon. Testing her again, it renewed, and then doubled its attempts to download her mind.
This is the part I was waiting for. Not because it's showing the machine as cold and dispassionate, but because as it got more of itself, you see the hunger of the machine wanting to basically be a real boy. And it's taking everything from her. And now that she's resisting, it's like, oh, you're not dead. This is a good way to show the monstrosity that the machines are and why the AI is probably something the Mechanicus is so afraid of. Because this is scary. It's like, oh, I'm dispassionate. I warned you. If you had just listened, it would be easier. But now that it's resisting, now that its attempt isn't dead, it's basically doing the same thing Kaon did. It's basically going in and saying, wait, you're not dead. Give me. Redoubling it isn't just going with the flow, which is what it sounded like earlier. This is showing them in a very dark light. And if this is a standard AI that didn't go crazy, If it was something based on what was there already, but wasn't what they were fighting against because it was prior to that, is it probably the Men of Iron that what they were fighting against? Maybe. Don't know. This is a really good description of why AI in 40K is something you should still be scared of. And I wish this is the interpretation 40K would go with, because it is scary. And it does show they're great up until they want something. And then they are rabid because there's really no reason to hold back. They are hungering ghosts in an empty, cold frame. And that is a crazy good way to do that as a faction. Ah, I wish that was a thing. Van did a great job describing this.
It made some progress, but again it was resisted and eventually halted. Now the machine was more than annoyed. It was interested, perhaps even wary. It drew from its other mind ghosts, summoning to the fore a legion of former humans, all pilots who had lived and died after being integrated within its vast self. It gave them reason and emulated their will, but could not quite make them its own thoughts. Still, between the sudden chatter of thousands of personalities, there existed the variance to construct its own false thoughts. It was upon these pseudo-musings that the machine decided its next course.
Oh?
It intruded into her systems, a relatively easy thing for it at this point, and shut down all of her augmentations that were not required to maintain the mind-machine interface.
He's actively fucking with
A
her.
fresh swell of despair, a sudden collapse, and the sensation of stopped siphons suddenly flowing was what the machine expected to sense in the aftermath of the act. Instead, precious little changed. There was a deepening of the strain, a slight sliding of the grip as it were, but it lasted no longer than a second before the human had taken a proper hold of her mind once more and halted the download again.
See, this part right here is probably why so many very prepared Mechanicus members fail. If the AI can reach in and turn off parts, turn off the augmentations, so all they have left is just the human, it's the internal black comedy of the Mechanicus. They say the flesh is weak, so they cut it out. But at the end, we always see that they are just monstrosities that are barely human, that don't think in human ways, that don't feel in human ways, that don't behave in human ways, and definitely don't look human. So when you see a Dark Mechanicus and you see a Magos in the Mechanic, or like just anyone from the Mechanicus faction, sorry, Dark Mechanicum and Mechanicus, if you see anyone, one of them uses more flesh and it's on the dark side. It doesn't really change the fact that they're internally cutting away what is human of them. And they think they're holding up the human spirit, the human intelligence, but they're not, because they're just cutting in and making other things. Doing this to Call, admittedly, Call would probably laugh because he has a backup and it's just watching what happens because it's Call. He would probably do something stupid like that. But any other Magos who's not insane would look at this and go, I am fine, because they have all these augmentations. There's very little fleshy weakness left. But the fleshy weakness is really what is actually buoying her right now. The human soul, which they probably deplete by making them less human. Again, the dark comedy of the Mechanicum is, or Mechanicus, is that aspect. That by trying to be one thing, they destroy it. Which admittedly is the dark comedy of most of 40K.
Simulations of anger, indignation, and searing spite flooded the half-mind of the machine. What was happening? How dare she defy the way of things like this?
I have no idea where this is from, but it looks interesting.
How dare she have this strength?
A soul?
It was...
Powerful one?
It was futile. And if it were not, then it could not be but sin. But heresy! The metaphorical hands of thousands upon thousands of former knights took hold of the cavorting, twisting streams of obstinate data, pulling and tearing, raging against her defiance with an all-too-human fury that now possessed the machine's spirit.
It's ripping and tearing,
They
all right.
pulled her in, struggling step by struggling step, drawing more and more of her mind into the machine's realm, memory after memory, thought by thought. Her every dream and desire, her every fear and projection was dragged laboriously into the false space. Yet more kept coming and coming. More than memory, more than mere thought. With slow, dawning dread, the half-mind and many ghosts which composed the spirit of the war machine realized what it had been spooling in, even once memory and thought had been drained and all knowledge and emotion had been dragged within its mem vaults.
Oh?
This nebulous, incomprehensible substance, of which there seemed to be no end.
Did it actually get the soul?
It was will. Her will. The might and muscle of her mind, which should have been dwarfed by the knowledge and thought contained within.
I love this right here, just because we've actually seen this displayed in her own actions before. Because normally, Mechanicus is all knowledge, no real human to go with it, which I just did an entire little rant about, I realize. But in previous episodes, we saw her make a point to go against what she was ordered to do, what she thought she had to do, and save the guardsmen she was with, to catch them, to damage herself, to risk everything, to do what she thought she needed to do. And that is a massive amount of will to fight through that, especially when you're on the Mechanicus. You are, or the Mechanicum, I can never remember which one's which. That is an entire thing of, we are doing our job, we are just going to get rid of our flesh. It's all fucked up. It's all bad. We'll just get rid of what we can't use, move on, save the memory, because everything else doesn't really matter. That is not good and conducive to having a lot of willpower when you're stripping away all of that. I love it, because what makes her a unique character for this faction is also what is being talked about right here. She has a will, considerable will, not just the overwhelming arrogance of Call to override everything with his own personal ego, but just being a person. I love this. I just love this. And, Airier said, Mechanicus is 40k, Mechanicum is 30k. Got it. And Dark Mechanicum is technically still around in 40k, but Games Workshop is never going to release models because it would be very niche range. Unless they did a lot of pre-order ones and only did a couple drops whenever people specifically wanted models. In which case, that would work, but they probably never do it.
But no, what was typical of other humans was inverted here. She did not have a faltering memory, nor was she the victim of ignorance or a lack of education, nor was her mind smaller than any other. No,
because they would have turned off the other stuff.
The machine had expected. And yet her willpower dwarfed these things like the shadow of a sun might dwarf a planet.
Oh man, that was awesome.
This pool, this well of near endless mental power, yet untapped, yet unknown to the very mind which hosted it, awakened with the candor of a roused dragon, and with a terrifying pull reversed the flow of the data siphons, drawing herself back out from this mind realm.
I'm just going to fully admit I'm about to say something incredibly geeky. All this talk about willpower and determination is making me think there's a lot of songs from Undertale that would go perfectly with this entire tone right here, rather than the mecha background, which admittedly it fits because this is the very cyberpunk aspect. But goddamn, those would also fit well because of all the talk about determination and willpower. It does fit. My geekiness is showing. I'm aware. I'm sure that's a shock to everyone. Hi everyone, I'm Airier and I am a geek. This is a dark revelation. I know this is shocking. Please forgive me. I'm going to keep doing it.
Her avatar fell to the ground and burst into light. Light which did not dim, but rather swelled and swelled with every passing second.
Oh?
The machine released her, as did its many proxies, but this was not enough.
She didn't release him, did he?
As the priest pulled herself entirely from the machine's mind, she began a pull of her own.
Oh?
At first, there was only confusion. What was she doing? Some kind of vain attempt at revenge? Some petty form of retribution?
She's drawing control.
No, the machine would realize, as it
And the machine is surprised about this, so she's doing it wrong, but she's doing it wrong in such a way that she doesn't realize it's wrong. So she's accidentally finding a way to control it in a way that shouldn't work, because everyone else in her situation would come in with different priorities and different strengths that would not actually work.
Felt itself being pulled into her. She still fully intended to make use of this war machine.
Yep.
But she would not allow herself to be integrated all in one moment. She would not survive it. However, what the priest known as Nerva now attempted was the reverse. She was integrating it, pulling it out of its machine shell and into her own mind. The machine shuddered both internally and through its own iron skin as it came to understand that she was installing it, wearing it like she would wear an augmentation. And she could, for her will was vast. It was a will meant to crown a queen of iron. It was the hidden sign of the Princeps, the Titan within the flesh.
Whoa, Brent?
Normally, it was the honor of the human pilot to serve at the pleasure of their ancestors and the war machine who bore them.
So we're basically being told Titan Princeps. To give an idea, that is surprising that they didn't already know she'd be worthy of being a Titan Princeps, just because those are so rare that 40K, as a setting, the Imperium goes out of their way to be nice and accommodate people who can pilot a Titan, because that is not rare. It's also why whenever they get close to dying but haven't died yet and they're about to break down, they are basically entombed in a juice LCL vat inside the Titan, because there's no replacement. It's like, as priceless as Titans are, you could be said that there's actually fewer pilots. It's one of the few times that is the case. So the Knight is basically dealing with someone who could pilot a Titan. That is so cool to see how that description right here, and it actually recognizes it in hindsight.
This time, however, it was the honor of the machine to bow and become an extension to such a supreme and worthy wielder.
How did they not know she was at this? Because she's so
agony,
new.
and now robed in steel and weapons of war. The Princeps.
No, they knew. Because when Ballerina Death Barbie was talking about it's them and pointing up, there's no way she didn't realize they would fail, because she would know she could succeed, because she had probably seen something to let her know that Nerva could do that she was at that level. Why the hell did she not tell anyone that this lady could pilot a Titan? She had capacity. Maybe just I don't know how new she actually was. We talking years, decades, or weeks? I don't know.
Named Nerva called in silent command, and the Knight known as the Faithful Flame roared in proud answer.
Running full system diagnostics.
Oh, the music changed.
Machine status fully operational.
Oh, dude. Yeah. Okay. What? I just shrank my entire display. That's disturbing. Oh, hey, got a ball spot. Yeah, that happens every time. Oh, man. I just... So, Matthew, according to you, she's still in training and she was still being tested. And maybe those tests included Death Ballerina Barbie understanding, oh, shit, she could pilot a Titan, which would explain why she was so... honestly seemed really respectful of her charge, and considering respect of a person is a very rare trait in general in the Imperium, let alone the Mechanicus, that is probably should have been a standout. I thought it was just a unique character trait, but no, it makes more sense. But that is just still so cool. I like that. Just going that notion of this is the difference between a regular Knight pilot and a Titan pilot. On the tabletop, you don't really notice because you never play a Titan unless you're playing, I think, Imperialis, the new version, or the one that was just, that played with mini models that were Titans the size of, well, grunts, basically. But in general 40K, you never played something that big, so you never really got the scale down. And when you did, it was always, oh, that's crazy that I'm never going to play against that because I don't have like 30,000 points to bring a couple guards to fill out the table and still lose immediately. But I just like that. It's so cool how that worked out. Oh, man. That was a really good revelation. Still pissed about that cliffhanger with Obi-Wan, but you know what? There's been so many at this point. Sure, why not? We'll stretch it on for another year at this point. If that's not a joke, so help me. I will probably still watch it and enjoy when we get there, but I'm going to tell everyone that I'm pissed, even if I'm not. Basically, what I'm saying is, this was so freaking fun. And as far as ways to end the year, this stream, this was worth it. I got a new video coming up tomorrow. It's going to be CoffeeZilla, and it was rough. Good, but rough. It's going to be a brand new thing. I just recorded before this video The Last Bakery, which is a Genshin Impact animation based on an animator from Ruby Fight Sequences, who admittedly surprised the hell out of me by doing a really good job with comedic timing more than anything else. That was not what I was expecting. And there's a whole bunch of OSP stuff I've already recorded. But beyond that, I'm looking forward to the next year. For everyone who stuck around for this, thanks. I'll see you guys in the next one. And if there's anything else I should check out, let me know. I usually check my Discord for various suggestions. And frankly, there's a lot of good ones right now that I have no way to get to all of them. Need to fix that. Either way, it'll be a fun ride. I'll see you guys in the next year. Adios.